قد وهب عباده المقربين الأدب. Alhamd is to praise Allah. And over here, Alif Lam is to show al-istighraq. That means all praises are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah? And what's the difference between alhamd and shukr? Does anyone know? What's the difference between praising Allah and thanking Allah? No one thought of these things. طيب. Alhamd is more general and it's more encompassing than a shukr. As we do alhamd and praise Allah at all times, ala kulli hal. As for shukr, and we thank Allah, shukr is done only when someone does good to you, someone does khair to you. For every hamd encompasses and consists of a shukr, but not all shukr is alhamd. Because shukr is only done at good, as for alhamd, it's done at all times. Tamam? This is narrated or said by Ibn Juzay in At-Tasheel li'ulum al-Tanzil. طيب. الحمد لله الذي قد وهب. قد over here is for تحقيق. وهب is to bestow. طيب. How is characters being bestowed? How is character being bestowed? Doesn't make sense. Does it make sense? How does Allah bestow etiquette and character? Does anyone know? طيب. Imam al-Bukhari rahmatullahi alayhi in his book Al-Adab al-Mufrad has stated إن الله قسم بينكم أخلاقكم كما قسم بينكم أرزاقكم. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has indeed divided and He has divided amongst you the moral character and good character, just like how He has given you sustenance. As in Ibn Rajab rahmatullahi alayhi in his book Jami' al-Jami' or say Jami' al-Ulum al-Hikam, Jami' al-Ulum wal-Hikam, he has mentioned that akhlaq is of two. Part of it is jibilli, part of it is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses each and everyone with. And they differ, people differ. Just like people differ in looks, people differ in wealth, some people are blessed with wealth, some people are blessed with looks, some people are likewise, people are blessed with al-akhlaq. Different people are blessed with different levels of akhlaq. And part of akhlaq is muktasab, is something you can learn. Something you can learn and try to fen and try to act upon. So certain qualities, if you see, certain times if you see a child, yeah, certain children below the age of 7, 5, if you want to aid them giving a shower, they're like, no, I don't want you to aid me. I want to take shower by myself, because they have haya. This haya is natural to them. And certain children, as soon as you tell them, I want to give you a shower, they'll remove their clothes and jump in the, what's it called, bath. Why is that? What's so different? Why is this child shy and this child not shy? It's just different. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses each person with different level of akhlaq. And certain parts of akhlaq, we can learn and try to practice upon them. فَلِذَا, the poet says, قَدْ وَهَبَ. Okay, what's the munasabah of starting alhamdulillah, starting with alhamd? Umuman, starting with alhamd, the author started his poetry with alhamd, following the Kitabullahi tabarak wa ta'ala. Likewise, seeking blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ وَلَإِن كَفَرْتُمْ إِنَّ عَذَابِي لَشَدِيدٌ. For the one who is grateful and thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and praises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will certainly increase you and give you more. For expecting more from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and expecting more blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has started his poetry with alhamd. Tabam. Then he goes on to say, عِبَادَهُ الْمُقَرَّبِينَ الْأَدَبَ. So the one who possesses good character or is bestowed and blessed with good character, they are the close servants of Allah. Because good character is such a ibadah that Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam has mentioned is in a hadith, ما نقله أبو داود والترمذي وأحمد, that أكمل المؤمنين إيمانا أحسنهم خلقا. That the one who's the most complete in faith and his belief are the ones who are the best, who possess the best of character. What we can understand from that is also, if someone who does not possess good character, what can we understand from this ibarah? If someone, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam says, okay, the most complete of the believers are the one who possess best of characters. So what's also true? It's also true that the one who does not possess the best of characters, they lack in complete iman. Because he does not possess the best of characters. تمام. ثم الصلاة بالسلام تلتقي على نبينا عظيم الخلق. الصلاة, what does الصلاة mean on the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم? لا أحد يعرف. نعم. جميل جميل. نعم صحيح. فنقله أبو العالية في كتابه ونقله أبو العالية ما رواه البخاري في صحيحه that sending salutations on Allah, on what's it called, the Prophet ﷺ, is to remember him and praise him in al-mala' al-a'la. And the other interpretations, such as making dua from istighfar from him, they're all problematic, as mentioned by Ibn al-Qayyim in their book, and he discusses that in Kitab Jilal Afham and Bada'i al-Fawaid. Then he goes on to say, ala nabiyyina azim al-khuluqi, Prophet. He sends salutations and blessings. What does sending as-salam mean to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? No. عبث. نعم. فالسلام جزاك الله خير. السلام is to make dua for the Prophet ﷺ in two ways. Number one, to preserve his body from any tampering or any harm. Likewise, to make dua for his sunnah to be preserved from any heresies and innovation. These are the two meanings of as-salam. على نبينا عظيم الخلق. What does nabi, what's the difference between النبي and الرسول? على كل نختصر لنا وقت قصير. جميل. هذا تفرقة but it doesn't answer how to define it. That's a good comparison. You can say that every prophet is a messenger, but not every messenger is a prophet. No, every messenger is a prophet, and not every prophet is a messenger. Now, they say the best person to define a prophet is Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah alayhi in Kitab al-Nubuwat. He says the prophets are chosen beings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to a nation of disobedient people. As for messengers, they're sent to a nation of disbelievers. So the difference between prophets and messengers are, prophets are sent to a nation of disobedient people, as for messengers are sent to a nation of disbelievers. Tamam. عظيم الخلق. This, what's it called? Trait or description of the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, the poet is trying to allude towards and give a reference towards the ayah وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who created everyone, the one who possesses the knowledge of all his creation, is praising and attesting and testifying that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam possesses the best character from all his creation. That's like a serious thing. Yeah, and Aisha radiallahu anha used to say that the Prophet ﷺ كان خلقه القرآن, that the Prophet ﷺ used to possess the character, that of the Quran, that his character was in tune and in line with what the Quran has stated. If you see the Quran, it was the mirror image of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ acted upon the Quran in every single way, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants it to be acted upon or expects us to act upon. That's why he has been praised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. طيب. وبعدها كأحسن الأخلاق يرقى بها صاحبه المراقي. بعد, this word بعد, the asl is أما بعد. This is called in Arabic حرف الفصل. حرف الفصل. The first person to use it is Dawood alayhi salam. على كل, what's it called? It's an emphasized sunnah to use it, but for you to make sure that you get reward by using it, you have to say amma ba'd. If you just cut off the amma part, you will not get rewarded. But the author, he omitted the part amma just so that the line rhymes. It's called darurat al-shi'r or istiqamat al-wazn. It's permissible. Just so that the poet rhymes, like the poem rhymes, he cut down the amma part. But if you want to get the reward, you have to say amma ba'd. The one who just says wa ba'd won't get the reward for it. هاك أحسن وبعد هاك أحسن الأخلاق يرقى بها صاحبها المراقي. He is alluding towards the hadith that إن المؤمن لا يدرك بحسن خلقه درجة القائم الصائم. That a mu'min, a believer, might reach the stations of a person who fasts in the day and the one who prays at night just by possessing good character. If you think about it, the one who fasts for the sake of Allah, only he knows that he fasts for the sake of Allah. And the one who prays at night, which shows these two actions, these two ibadah, these two acts of worship show utmost sincerity for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sahih? Yeah. But you can reach these stations by just possessing good character, which shows the seriousness of possessing good character. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam says, ما من شيء أثقل في الميزان من حسن الخلق. That there's nothing in the day of judgment that's going to be more heavier on the scales than possessing good character. طيب, نواصل ما قال, the author begins, فأولا راعِ مع الله الأدب بترك الإثم وبفعل ما وجب. The author begins by mentioning the etiquettes and by stating that firstly, one must observe utmost etiquette with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is due to two reasons. Why did he mention maintaining etiquette with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the beginning? This is for two reasons, one of two reasons. Number one, to state the significance and importance of it. And number two, to indicate by observing etiquette with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you would be granted tawfiq, as in divine ability, to act upon the following etiquettes that's going to be mentioned, and that's coming. These are the two reasons why the author has mentioned and begun his poetry by mentioning maintaining etiquette with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. طيب, what does it mean to state the significance and importance of maintaining etiquette with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What we have to understand is the one who does not observe etiquette with Allah can never be described as someone who possesses good character. Even if he's good in heart, even if he possesses all the other characters and mannerisms that's going to be mentioned in this poetry and the others which we know of, if he possesses everything, but he does not maintain etiquette with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's useless. And we do not describe him as someone who possesses good character. And what does it mean to possess or maintain etiquette with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It means to act upon his commandments and give him his due rights as he is our creator and Lord. Yeah? Likewise, to abstain from things that he has forbidden and not associate partners with him, whether in terms of our actions or our intentions. This is the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are the etiquettes which we should maintain with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If someone now tells you there's a good person and that person comes and beats your mom or swears at her, would you describe him as someone who possesses good character? No. Okay, how about someone who disobeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who does not act upon his commandments? He can never be described as someone who's a good person, someone who possesses good character, even if he's someone who's well-mannered, someone who observes all the etiquettes. Likewise, if someone who observes the commandments of Allah and acts upon that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to do and abstains from that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden, but he has some shortcomings in his character, like he gets angry very quickly, he's a little bit stingy. We do not say that he's not of good character. We say that he's lacking of good character, but he has the asl, he has the main requirement for you to first be even considered of someone who's good, which is he's at least practicing, he at least maintains etiquette with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other things, people might be having shortcomings. Everyone has certain shortcomings. But the asl of good character and mannerism is to maintain etiquette with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and observe and give him his due rights. Tamam. He begins, how can we give Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala his due rights? بِتَرْكِ الْإِثْمِ وَبِفِعْلِ مَا وَجَبْ. The poet says that we can maintain etiquette with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala firstly, by two things. Number one, abstaining and leaving off that which he has forbidden us to do. Number two, fulfilling that which he has commanded us to do. And the asl is, where did he get this fikrah? Is from hadith of Sahih Muslim. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam says, مَا نَهَيْتُكُمْ عَنْهُ فَاجْتَنِبُوا وَمَا أَمَرْتُكُمْ بِهِ فَأْتُوا بِهِ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Yeah? If you think about this hadith, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam says, that which I have forbidden, stay away from it. Don't even come close to it. Don't even come near it. He didn't say don't do it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say don't do zina. He said, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا zina. Don't even come near it. Yeah? For that which is forbidden, don't even come close to it. And then what he said is, that which I have commanded you to do, do it to the best of the ability. If you think about this hadith, both the author and the hadith of Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam began by first stating to abstain from sins, which shows that leaving of sins is more emphasized and is more important for a practicing believer or one who wants to be observing good character than doing good deeds. You can be doing less good deeds, but if you commit sins, then you're considered from the wicked. Ibn Rajab rahmatullah alayhi in his book Jami' al-Ulum wal-Hikam mentions that good deeds are done by both wicked people and salihin, the ones who are righteous. But the distinguishing factor that distinguishes between someone who's righteous and someone who's wicked and not practicing is the ability to leave off sins. That's why leaving of sins is more emphasized, and that's the reason why Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam first stated that you should leave off sins, not even come close to it, and then stated that you should try to do good deeds to the best of your ability. Ibn al-Qayyim rahmatullah alayhi says that, he says something similar. He says, the one who, why is leaving off sins more emphasized and more important? He's saying that because for you to do a bad deed, it requires you to go out of your way, intend it, and try to do it, and then be able to do it. So it requires the ability to do it, and you end up doing it. That's why the punishment is more severe, and the consequences of sins are way more severe. And the way we can say that, like if someone says, I do good deeds to the best of my capabilities, and I do few, but I do not commit sins, we say this person is someone who's salih, he's righteous. And at the same time, we have a person who does a lot of righteous deeds, and he has a lot of bad deeds. He has he does all the good deeds and bad deeds at the same time. We say this person is a wicked person. Being able to stay away from muharramat is more emphasized in the sharia than doing the commandments. That's the reason why the author has first begun by forsaking sin and mentioning to leave off sins. Tamam. Let's keep going. وحسن ظن وتوكل رجاء حب وتوحيد ومن خاف. حسن الظن is to trust and have good faith in Allah's decision and hope for the best outcome for what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen for you, even if you don't like it. وتوكل is to rely upon Him and have certainty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will aid you and bring that which benefits you, whether in the dunya or akhirah, or keep you away from that which is harmful. Certain times we see outcomes that's not pleasing to us, but we should understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that which is good for us. فَتَوَكُّل is to have certainty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring us khair, regardless of the scenario, whether in this dunya or akhirah, but bishart that we do and we take the means to achieve something that which we believe is to be khair. Tamam. Ar-raja. Ar-raja is to have hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At times when we feel that we are lost, at times when we feel empty, at times when we feel that we're going to be punished, to hope for the mercy of Allah is ar-raja. And al-khawf is the opposite of ar-raja. Al-khawf is a trait where one must flee back to Allah in awe and terror. And it should lead us to do and act upon the commandments of Allah and stay away from that which He has forbidden. Certain times you might see certain sinners, their life is going very well. There's no problems. Yes? Yeah, like you might see, okay, this person is disobeying Allah. He's not acting upon any of the commandments, but nothing's happening to them. Yes? Yeah? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't be fooled by this. This is called sifatul istidraj of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-istidraj and al-makr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punishes a servant. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not punish a servant by taking away from someone who does not have anything. You can't hurt someone who doesn't have anything. Rather, the best way to punish someone is to give everything they wish for, then snatch it away from them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَسَنَسْتَدْرِجُهُم مِّنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ وَأُمْلِي لَهُمْ إِنَّ كَيْدِي مَتِينٌ. My plans are very severe. وَنُسَارِعُ لَهُمُ الْخَيْرَاتِ بَلْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. We'll give them all the good, from children, from wealth and good spouse, everything, but all of a sudden, boom, everything taken away from it. Because that's what's going to hurt them most. If you don't give if someone doesn't have anything to lose, you can't hurt them. But the best way to hurt someone and punish someone is snatch everything. فالخوف is, you should always be scared if nothing's happening in your life, you're not being trialed. Don't feel too safe. أَفَأَمِنُوا مَكْرَ اللَّهِ. Do you feel too safe from the plots of Allah? فَلَا يَأْمَنُ مَكْرَ اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْخَاسِرُونَ. Nobody feels too safe from Allah except that they are from the losers, the one who's going to face severe consequences. What's it called? Ibn Abbas in Musannaf Ibn Abi Shaybah or Ibn Razzaq, I'm not sure, I don't recall. He says, Al-Kaba'ir min akbar al-Kaba'ir, from the greatest of what's called sins or major sins is that you feel safe from the plots of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also you feel that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala won't have mercy on you. So the one who's feeling lost, he should always have hope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As for the one who is disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, should always be scared that if nothing's happening to you, just be scared. And this fear should lead you to act upon the commandments and do more good deeds. And a raja should not make you go away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's this thing, this connection where you should always come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regardless of what your scenario is. Whether you're a person who's acting upon good deeds and acting upon commandments, even the Salaf used to be scared. They used to say, we're not sure if our deeds would be accepted because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only accepts good deeds from the best of the best, those who possess the trait of taqwa and who stays away from all the bad. And this is very difficult. The Salaf used to be scared about their acceptance. This is the khawf which we should possess and the trait which we should possess. And we should never feel that we're too blessed. Everything's going too well. Rather, it's this thing that anything can happen to me. I should seek more forgiveness. I should come back to Allah. I should stay away from I should stay away from bad deeds, regardless of my scenario. If nothing is happening to you today, it may happen tomorrow. If not tomorrow, day after. So you should always seek the mercy and flee back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hoping that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala aids you when you need to be aided. حُبٍّ وَتَوْحِيدٍ وَمَنْ خَافَ نَجَا. And you should love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more than you love anything, and this should lead you to sacrificing and giving up a lot of that which is the desires of the dunya and stay away from that which is prohibited and that which is prohibited. نعم. وَمَنْ خَافَ نَجَا. And whoever fears Allah will be safe. تمام. طيب. وَقِرْ نَبِيَّهُ وَعَظِّمْ سُنَّتَهُ قَدِّمْ عَلَى كُلِّ الْوَرَاءِ مَحَبَّتَهُ. طيب. The author alludes towards the hadith, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى أكون أحب إليه من ولده ووالده والناس أجمعين, that none of you guys will possess true belief or true faith until I am more beloved than your parents and your child and everyone in the world. طيب. To revere Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to revere the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and love him and glorify his sunnah has many meanings. Number one is to act upon his teachings and follow it. Number two, to love his family and love him as a person. Number three, to learn about his seerah and try to remember the sacrifices he has made. Number four, from his rights is to send a lot of salutations upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And likewise, not to exaggerate in his love and put him in a status that he wouldn't be pleased with, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be pleased with. Certain people, because of the insane or the exaggeration of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they end up doing actions that would be displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited and forbidden us to do. طيب. وبر والديك ولتطيعهما تفز وصل يا بني الرحمة. From the good etiquettes, rather from the obligations of this religion, is to be dutiful and to be obedient to your parents. And being obedient to parents is muqayyad. It has certain conditions. Number one, as long as it does not go against the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his religion. So if a parent now, for example, says, don't read the Quran, don't go to the masjid, don't do hijab, and so don't keep a beard, yeah? Don't pray in the airport because everyone's looking, yeah? In this case, you're not allowed to even obey them. Likewise, if a parent asks for something or instructs or commands you for something that you're not capable of fulfilling, you're not obliged to obey. If a parent says, pick up an elephant, because I'm your parent, you have to listen to me. It's not like you can't even pick up an elephant. Another thing is the obedience of parents is connected to that which benefits them in the dunya or akhirah. So serving them, helping them, if they command you to do something that they need assistance with, that's obligatory. Anything to do with you, such as you have to eat a burger right now. If a parent commands you, it's not obligatory to abide by it. ثالثا, it's not, obligatory to obey your parents in things that might cause you harm, whether in this dunya or akhirah. طيب, what does it mean to obey the parents? Number one is al-infaq wal-ihsan. Treat them with kindness and softness, and use the best of phrases, and always try to maintain a level of respect with them. Number two, al-infaq. You try to spend money on them if you're financially independent, and try to support them to the best of your capabilities. That's from their rights. Number three, you make dua for them while they're alive, likewise after they're dead. Number four, you express your gratitude verbally, likewise physically. You thank them verbally, likewise physically you hug them and kiss them and show them that you're really grateful for what they have done for you. This is how you fulfill the obligations and be dutiful to your parents. وَلْتُطِعْهُمَا is the showing the part where you should provide for them financially to the best of your capabilities. تَفُزْ وَصِلْ أَيَا بُنَيَ الرَّحِمَ. Likewise, from good characters to maintain good ties with your close relatives and assisting them if they require any aid. And timely checking up on them. It's a means of sustenance, and likewise it increases your lifespan, as narrated in the hadith of Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam used to say that whoever maintains ties with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with his relatives or close relatives, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will maintain the ties with him. And whoever cuts off or boycotts their relatives or tries to avoid them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will avoid them. What does it mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will avoid them? You guys know? As in, your du'as might not even get accepted. فَقَاطِعُ الرَّحِمِ, the one who tries to stay away from his relatives and does not check up on them, it's very likely that your dua, ad'iyah, won't get accepted. نعم. طيب, نواصل ما قاله المصنف. We don't have much time. بجل كبيرا وارحم الصغير وساعد الضعيف والفقير. Respect the elder, whether it's a person who is elder in terms of their age or also in terms of their knowledge. Likewise, have mercy upon those who are young by showing lutf and forgiving all the mistakes or annoyance or things they annoy you with. You just have to have sabr with young people, and do not have qaswa, do not have harshness on dealing with people who are young. وَسَاعِدِ الضَّعِيفَ وَالْفَقِيرَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, puts people in situations, and at times people might be at a situation of ضعف, which is weakness. And from good etiquettes is that you don't see someone who's weak as someone who's miserable, rather you try to aid him. And likewise, you aid al-faqir by helping him financially as much as you can. وَكُنْ شُجَاعًا صَابِرًا كَرِيمًا وَشَاكِرًا وَفَطِنًا حَلِيمًا. He mentions quite a few, etiquette and characterism or mannerisms. From that is shuja'. Being brave comes as a trait that comes from someone who loves or who does not love the dunya. The one who loves dunya is always going to be someone who's timid, someone who's fearful. For courage and shaja'a, it comes from hubb al-maut. As-sabr is the ability, then he mentions the next quality, which is sabr, is the ability to restrain oneself from complaining. Likewise, controlling one's actions or acting out of agitation. That's a sabr. A sabr in Islam is of three types. A sabr ala al-ma'aib wal-masa'ib. A sabr, that which you're going to be tested when you're trialed with calamities and problems. That's when your sabr gets tested. Likewise, a sabr when you're doing a ta'at, when you're doing good deeds. That's when it's going to be tested. Can you sit and read the Quran for 3 hours? Can you sit or can you stand and pray every day 2 hours at night? That's when your sabr is going to be tested. So a sabr, the second type of sabr is sabr ala ta'at. And third type of sabr is sabr ala al-ma'asi. An-nafs and al-hawa, the human soul, always desires that which is forbidden. They say, the Arabs say, kullu mamnu'in marghub. Everything that's forbidden or they told you to stay away from, you should, it's desired. That's to do with the sabr. And so I mentioned three types of sabr, صح? الصبر على المصائب والصبر على الطاعات والصبر على المعاصي. Because the human beings, they need sabr to stay away from that which is prohibited. نقله ابن رجب في كتابه جامع العلوم والحكم. طيب. الكرم is to be generous, and العرب ما كانوا يعرف they were not known to be بخلاء. They were not known to be stingy. The Arabs, even before Islam had certain mannerisms and characterisms that they were known. From them is al-karam wa sakha. Being able to spend without feeling without having any feelings. Some people, if they always calculate, okay, $1, I earn $16, $17 an hour, it's taking away from my savings. That's not how Arabs used to. They used to spend left, right, and center. This ability is, wallah, is a blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives. And not everyone is, especially we're living in a society which is afflicted with capitalism. Everyone is just very selfish. Everyone is up to their own savings. Everyone is busy buying stuff for themselves. But from the best characteristics which a person can adorn themselves with or possess is al-karam and al-sakha. Imam Shafi'i used to say, تستر بالسخاء كل عيب تستر بالسخاء فكل عيب يغطيه كما قيل السخاء. Generosity and al-karam and being able to spend is such a trait that it covers the rest of your flaws in your character traits. If someone has anger, he has maybe 100 of flaws. But if you have the trait of al-karam and al-sakha, it will hide the rest of your flaws. هكذا السخاء, that's the importance of sakha. وشاكرا وفطنا وحليما, and being grateful. And the way you're being, there is ways to be grateful. If someone does good to you, كما نقله عليه الصلاة والسلام في الطبراني, if someone does good to you, you try to do good back for him. فَكَافِئُوهُ فَإِن لَمْ تَجِدُوا If you're not able to do good for him, the least what you can do is make dua for him. Likewise, كما نقله الطبراني كذلك, if someone does good to you, the way you can be thankful and grateful for him is to say جزاك الله خير. Another way, كما نقله كذلك الطبراني, all this ahadith كلها صحيحة بعضها حسن, what's it called, that if someone does good to you and if you're not able to do good back to him, the least you can do is praise him in front of other people. For these things are the ways you can be grateful for someone. Imma, you do something for him physically. Number two, if you cannot do, make dua for him. Number three, the least you can say is you tell him in front of his face, Jazakallah khair for doing this. Some people, they just don't know how to praise. They don't, it hurts their feelings to praise someone. Number four is you praise him in front of other people. That's the least you can do, either one of this. And that way, you're khalas, you're shakir. You're done your part. وَفَطِنًا حَلِيمًا Fatin is to be clever and intellectual, is to know what decision to take in the right time, in the right place, and know what to say in the right time, in the right place. Some people, they're just they act upon their emotions and feelings. What's it called? They might say, what's it called? If someone might do something wrong, yeah? They might go up to the person and might say something out of emotional, like, what's it called? Zealousness. And this might cause more harm. Fatin is someone who's intellectual and clever, and he knows how to bring about khair in the right time, in the right place. Tamam. Halima is being forbearing, is the opposite of ghadab. Yeah, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam used to say, al-ghadab min ash-shaytan. Like, anger is from shaitan. Yeah, and being forbearing is something that requires practice. Yeah, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam used to say, إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ وَالْحِلْمُ بِالتَّحَلُّمِ. So it requires practice. It requires you to be tested of your patience. After a time, after you try to practice controlling your anger, only then will you be able to control your anger. And from the ways, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam has given many ways. They say, Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam used to say, if you are afflicted with anger, try to do wudu or stay in the state of wudu. And if you're standing, sit down immediately. If you're sitting, lay down immediately. Yani, there's ways. Even if that does not, try to run away from the situation. Don't speak or act or make decisions in time of anger. And most of the times, many of our decisions which we make in the time of anger leads us to misery. Tamam. وَذَا أَنَاتٍ وَحَيَاءٍ وَارْفُقِي وَكُنْ أَمِينًا وَتَوَاضَعْ وَاسْتُقِي. Okay, what's it called? Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, taban, is, alluding towards certain characteristics. From them is being comprising and being someone who is of musamaha, someone who gives excuses to people. Likewise, someone who possesses shyness, someone who doesn't. Shyness, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, kama dhakarna lakum, is a trait which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives different human beings with different like levels. Certain people, they're modest and shy naturally. And certain people, they're just shameless. That's how they were born. And there's things you can do to fix it. The least you can do is learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, try to practice. But also these traits, many of your traits and perceptions and how you act in your life, it comes from, number one, it comes back from the environment you live in. Number two, it comes back from the people you surround yourself with. Number three, it comes back from the family you come from. Al-irqu dassas, the Arab used to say. They used to also say, يعني من شب على شيء شاب عليه. If that's how you were brought up or grown, yeah. If someone was always brought up in a certain characteristics where they were like shameless, they were like always wearing short clothes, all of a sudden they start practicing, or they're starting wearing what's good clothes, or they're trying to hide. There's always a chance that they'll go back. There's always a chance they can fall back. But someone who's brought up and raised up in modesty, it's very rare. You can't, because that's the fitrah. It's difficult to convince someone to take the fitrah away from them. It's very difficult. You can go to a qawm who does not believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but in the same time, they're modest. يعني what's it called? And if you tell them to be immodest, it's difficult. You can't convince them otherwise. Tamam, let's keep going. What's it called? وَرْفُقِي, this is alluding towards the hadith of Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, إِنَّ اللَّهَ رَفِيقٌ يُحِبُّ الرِّفْقِ وَيُعْطِي عَلَى الرِّفْقِ مَا لَا يُعْطَى or يُعْطَى عَلى الرِّفْقِ مَا لَا يُعْطَى عَلى الْعُنْفِ. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam used to say, indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is gentle and He loves gentleness and He grants through gentleness that which He does not grant through harshness. وَكُنْ أَمِينًا, being trustworthy, keeping up to that which is promised or that which is expected from you. وَتَوَاضَعْ, which is to be humble. Humble is humility. The Salaf used to say there's a difference between acting humble and being humble as possessing a trait of humbleness, humility. There's not like some people, they're just humble in terms of kalam, but in terms of their dimagh, they think they're on top of the world. And this comes from a trait called hubb al-ri'asa. Human beings, it's just in their natural, the nafs, okay? It loves to be in a pedestal on a station where it's heard, where everyone looks up to it. Inna al-insana la yatgha. Like it wants to be from the ru'asa, it wants to be from the heads, it wants to be famous, it wants to be of someone who possesses authority. But that's why hubb al-ri'asa is something that takes away a lot of humility. And the Salaf used to say, how can you be humble? They used to say, okay, one of the ways you can be humble is if you see someone who's older than you, yakfik, it's more than enough that you should believe that this person has done more good deeds than you. And if you see someone who's younger than you, yakfik, you should also see that this person has done lesser bad deeds than you. It's more likely that they did lesser bad deeds than you. In that way, when you see someone who's young, see it from that this person is more pure than me. He has done less forbidden acts. You see someone old, this person is more experienced. He has sabaqani fil khair. He's ahead of me in good deeds and righteousness. So I should respect him and see myself below him. And in both cases, then you'll see yourself always below the person you're speaking to. Wasduqi is to be honest in kalam. Let's keep going because time is of the essence. تحلى بالعدل وبالإحسان والعفو والوفاء والإتقان. Adorn yourself with the qualities of justice. And justice in Islam is based on equity, upholding rights, and judgments based on evidence, and to be against oppression. Al-ihsan is kindness, wal-afwi wal-wafa'i wal-itqani is kindness, pardoning, and loyalty. These are traits which are self-explanatory. I don't have to explain each one of them. But someone who wishes to, possess good mannerisms and character, they should try to express these qualities when they're interacting with other people. تمام. سن اللسان واحفظ الجوارح أحب كل مسلم كن ناصحا. Protect your tongue from all sorts of sins. Like over here, when he says guard your tongue, it means all sorts of sins, such as backbiting, lying, slandering, exposing people's sins, and so on and so forth. واحفظ الجوارح, and likewise protect your other limbs from sins, such as like the eyes from seeing that which is haram, the ears listening to that which is haram, and so on and so forth. And أحب كل مسلم كن ناصحا, have genuine love and care for Muslims, we have genuine care and love for Muslims by taking initiative to help them in their hard times and distress, and when they're being sad and when they're going through hardships. You should never celebrate a Muslim's distress. Some people, a Muslim, even if they're from the innovators or heretics, someone has some certain mistakes, or they are from the heretics, or they have innovations. At the end of the day, they're Muslims. You should never celebrate a Muslim's death or their sadness, even if there's something that occurred between you, like someone hit your car, and then you had a, let's say, argument, and you don't like this person. This guy was a little bit petty. But if he dies, you should not say, Alhamdulillah, he died. That's not how we should act, because that's dunyawi. At the end of the day, you should be the bigger person. كن ناصحة, طيب, and be someone who's someone who gives advice. طيب. Giving advice to your Muslim brother, the goal should be to aid him to that which is of his best interest. And certain times, a nasiha might not be suitable. When giving nasiha, you should always see the time, the place, and who you are. It does not befit a person who's broke and poor to give nasiha to someone who's rich. It does not befit someone who's not practicing at certain times to give nasiha to someone who's really righteous. What you want to do if you really, because what's the gharad again? For you to give nasiha, your goal and intention should be to get an outcome that's going to be in the best interest of your Muslim brother. Yes? So at times, a nasiha should be done or given judging based on the time, who you are, and the maqam of that person, likewise the place. Does that make sense? So a young person should not normally give nasiha to a person who's old. They will not even accept it. They'll say, I've seen you when you're young, I've seen you when you're naked, what are you on about? I'm not going to take it. That's why certain times we try to convince our parents on certain things and they don't agree with us. It's not going to work. That's how life is. You have to, nasiha always comes from up or someone who's on the same level. It does not come from the person who's lower than them. So okay, how do you deal with it? So if we want to give nasiha to someone who's above us, speak to someone you know, tell him to speak, address this issue with that person. That's the best way. Because again, you have to see fiqh al-nasiha. How can I give nasiha and how can I bring about khair? How can I bring about change? It's not, okay, I want to give nasiha for the sake of giving nasiha. That's gonna cause mafsada and darar. It's gonna cause more harm. And at times, it might even ruin the relationship between you and the person you wish to advise. So certain times, you might not know a person, you're not close in proximity in terms of relationship. And you know that if giving advice might ruin it, don't give nasiha in that case. Does it make sense? What's it called? I just have 15 minutes, I guess. طيب, what's it called? تقبل النصح من الثقات وكن محافظا على الصلاة. What's it called? Accept advice from athiqat. From the conditions of advice, accepting advice is two. Number one, the person has to be trustworthy. Number two, the person is known to be better than you in that matter or more experienced than you. So you're not going to accept a nasiha of, what's it called, in Islamic, like if someone comes with an Islamic question, you're not going to ask it to a doctor or you're not going to ask it to an engineer. So there's two things. Number one, the person is trustworthy. Number two, the person is experienced or more, like what's it called, more experienced in that specific subject. وَكُنْ مُحَافِظًا عَلَى الصَّلَاةِ. Be observant of your prayers by making sure that you perform it in the right time. And if you're a man, you should perform it in congregation. طيب. وَوَقْتَكَ اشْغَلْهُ بِالْإِنْتِفَاعِ وَالْمَالَ فَاحْفَظْهُ عَنِ الضَّيَاعِ. For the poet Al-Hakami, rahmatullah alayhi, used to say, فَالْوَقْتُ أَغْلَى مَا حَبَاكَ الْمَوْلَى حَذَارِ أَن تُضِيعَهُ وَأَوْلَى. Time is something that is of essence and can never be purchased or returned. Hence, you should be very strategic with your time and you should busy yourself with that which benefits you either in this dunya or al-akhirah. Likewise, you should protect your money from waste as there might come a time where you might need money. طيب. بهمة تعلم المفيدة وطالع الكتبة المزيدة. Have high desire and eagerness in seeking whether knowledge and that which is beneficial to you. From the simat of a talib al-ilm is to have himma عالية جدا. يعني they have high aspirations, high goals. But that does not come just by dreaming or just having that aspiration. It comes with resilience. It comes with sacrifice. It comes with endurance. It comes with perseverance. It comes with self-discipline. Merely dreaming does not help you or aid you achieving your dreams. Rather, it requires and has some conditions. From them is possessing traits such as perseverance, resilience, self-discipline. So that's why people who are always, they want to, like, you might find people, yeah? All of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm going to memorize the Quran. I love the Quran. I'm going to memorize it. Memorize it 1 month, then they leave it off. Because they make the decisions based on emotions. Emotions won't get you too far in life. Rather, what helps you and aids you to be someone who's successful, whether it's in this dunya or akhirah, is self-discipline, resilience. وطالع الكتبة المزيدة, and browse through books and you'll gain more beneficial knowledge. واحترم الكتاب والمعلم. From the etiquette of a student of knowledge or someone who possesses good qualities is that he respects his books and stationery. So someone should not throw the pens and keep the, what's it called, books in the ground. Our teachers used to be very strict with that. Nowadays, forget about the books of ilm. We see masahif, people throw it in the ground, people put it under their armpits while they're praying taraweeh. These things, يستغرب صراحة. Umar radiallahu anhu used to be so strict when it comes to masahif. At one time, he was bought, كما نقله Abdullah ibn Ahmad in As-Sunnah, Kitab As-Sunnah, that Umar radiallahu anhu was once brought a mushaf that's very tiny. And he got so angry that he started punishing the person who did it. It's like, how can you disrespect the mushaf and the kitab Allah tabarak wa ta'ala? And nowadays we have masahif thrown in the ground, torn into pieces, what's it called, filled with dust. هذه يعني صراحة معاصي صراحة, people have to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Likewise, واحترم المعلمة يعني واحترم الكتابة والمعلمة واكرمن ما استطعت العلماء. We should respect and honor our teachers, and we respect and honor our teachers in three aspects. Number one, with regards to how you ask questions. Number two, what are the etiquettes you observe while sitting in their gatherings. Number three, giving them the rights they deserve. طيب, how do you ask questions to your teachers? Number one, you should ask questions in the appropriate time and place, that which is suitable. Sometimes, an example of a sheikh is in janazah, you don't want to go ask him masala ilmiya or something. Like the time or the place is not suitable for it. The time is not, or the sheikh's mother died. You don't want to go and say, oh sheikh, what's this book? What's your opinion on this matter? At time, you should observe the right time and place and make the right decision on when to ask the appropriate question. Number two, asking proper and clear questions. You don't want to ask ambiguous questions where the sheikh himself will get confused. And third, lastly, you should not be persistent in asking a question. If you asked a question and sheikh ignored you, don't ask it again. خلاص. Like if you ignored it, you ignored it. Just continue. Another thing which I've seen within طلاب العلم في هذا الزمان, يعني from the بلايا, which والله غريب. They go to mashayikh and they go to scholars to test them in their knowledge. They ask and get the most difficult of the questions, and they just want to test them. What's the knowledge? What's the difference between ruh and nafs? What's the difference? And they just love doing this. They want to put the sheikh in a pedestal where he can't answer the question. He wants to test the sheikh's knowledge. Like, okay, the sheikh was not able to answer the question. هذا والله إياكم والأغلوطات. You should not intend to ask a question to expose his inability or his lack of knowledge. That's against sincerity. And قد يعاقب, like you might be punished for that by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for doing that. طيب, أقبل وأنصتن للمحدث وقدم الأكبر للتحدث. This is the 17th line. طيب, when being addressed or spoken to, listen to someone and do not cut him off in speech. If someone's speaking, don't cut him off in between. Number two, try to face the person when you're being addressed to. Okay? And the only exception is if you're in a gathering. If a person is speaking and you're in a gathering, if someone turns the other direction, that's not a problem. But if you're spoken or being addressed one-to-one, you should face to the person, listen attentively and not cut him off in their speech. وَقَدِّمِ الْأَكْبَرَ فِي التَّحَدُّثِ, and always give precedence to one who's elder to you, whether in terms of knowledge or the one who's older than you in age. Let them speak first and then reply. And do not add on to what they say. Certain times, you might be attending certain ulama's durus, and they might say something, and you have something to add on. Don't say anything. Don't add on to something. He might leave off something. That's okay. Let it be. And some people, when we used to attend durus of the mashayikh, for example, a sheikh would say, إنما الأعمال بالنيات. The guy's like, yeah, sheikh, قاله عمر رضي الله عنه, قال عليه الصلاة عن عمر. You don't have to add on comment. Nobody asked you to do that. That's disrespectful. You don't have to add on explanations or additions to a person who's more elder to you or even someone who's more knowledgeable than you. حتى نكمل thing. We have only 4 minutes. Let's quickly go. بالخبر فانطقا وإلا فاصمتي وقبل نقل خبر تثبتي. Always speak less than necessary, because the more you speak, the lesser your speech will be valued and your speech will be considered banal. People won't give thaman or weight to your kalam. And Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam used to say, "Man kathura kalamuhu kathura saqtuhu." The one who speaks a lot or is excessive in his speech is more susceptible or is more prone to making mistakes. He'll most likely make more mistakes. What's it called? If you want to speak, you should have a purpose and a motive, and it should be something that's going to be beneficial either in this dunya or akhirah. فلذا قال عليه الصلاة والسلام من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا وليصمت. طيب وقبل نقل خبر تثبتي, and if you have any information, make sure that you authenticate and you're sure about its authenticity before spreading it. طيب وقدما صلاة الاستخارة إذا هممت ثم الاستشارة. If you wish to make an important decision where you're reluctant in, or you wish to seek blessings in a decision you're certain with, in both the scenarios. So if you're certain with the decision or you're reluctant, okay, in both the cases, it's an emphasized sunnah that you should offer salatul istikhara. And that is by making the dua of salatul istikhara. Allahumma inni astakhiruka bi'ilmika wa astaqdiruka biqudratika. In what's it called in Sahih Bukhari, it's mentioned. You should offer two, nafil prayer, and then make the dua of istikhara. When should you make it? Should you make it before taslim or after taslim? Mahal al-khilaf, the ulama have differed. طيب, likewise, you should, after that, if you're reluctant, you should also add on to consult with those who are trustworthy and more experienced than you. You should not consult everyone, but you should consult someone about that decision to make sure that the decision you're taking is something that's proper. تمام. وأتبع الخطأ باعتذاري وأتبع الذنب بالاستغفار. تمام. The author says, if you make a mistake, there's two things that needs to be made. Number one is you acknowledge it, and the first step to fixing a mistake or a problem is you acknowledge it. Second is you genuinely apologize to the person. Be the bigger person and just apologize. Then وأتبع الذنب بالاستغفار. If you commit a sin, then you seek forgiveness. Al-istighfar is to seek that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala conceals your sin and forgives it. So al-istighfar has satr and al-ghufran. So like what's it called? The way to translate Arabic is very difficult. But al-istighfar consists of two things. Number one, you're seeking that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives your sin and also conceals it. Alif sin ta in the Arabic language, in the ulama al-balagha, alludes towards seeking something. It alludes towards talab. تمام. أفشي السلام صاحب الأخيار لا تؤذي إنسانا أخص جارة ولا أخص الجارة. طيب, you should always initiate salam, especially if you're the younger person. You should initiate the person who's older. If you're walking and the person sitting, you should be the one who should initiate. If you get into a gathering and you're just one person, you should be the one who should initiate. So it's always lower to higher. The one who's lower should always initiate the salam. And the best way to give salam is the complete salam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. The ziyada maghfiratu is not authentic. All the scholars have agreed upon that. And if someone gives you salam, it's wajib, according to consensus, كما نقله ابن عبد البر في التمهيد, to return back to the salam. وإذا حييتم بتحية فحيوا بأحسن منها أو ردوها إن الله كان على كل شيء حسيبا. نعم. طيب, what's it called? So if someone gives you salam, you should return back to it, unless you're using the washroom and someone gives you salam. You're in the washroom. It's not obligatory that you're not supposed to even give salam. Likewise, if you're praying, are you supposed to give back salam? نقله إمام النسائي في حديث النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام that النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام once replied to salam in prayer by just giving ishara. If you're in prayer, it's allowed for you to. It's mubah. لا يستحب. Likewise, if you're in a gathering and someone gives salam, it's not meant for just you. It's for the entire gathering. It's not wajib for you to give back the salam if it's an entire gathering. Tamam. What's it called? وَصَاحِبِ الْأَخْيَارَ, befriend those who are righteous. Because again, your perceptions, your preferences, your interests in this world is shaped not by yourself. by the ones who your friends or who you surround yourself with. If you're surrounding yourself with people who always love business, how to make money and stuff, you'll end up thinking like that. You're like, okay, how to make money, how to make money. If you surround yourself with those who love memorizing and seeking knowledge, you'll end up having the same interests. If you surround yourself with those who love Arabic, you'll end up having the same interests. If you surround yourself with those who love going to gym, you'll have the same interests, so on and so forth. Your tastes, your preferences, don't think that they're personal. Rather, it's shaped and taken from your friends and those who you surround yourself with and the environment you live in. لا تؤذي إنسانا أخص الجارة. Always, do not wrong anyone or harm anyone, specifically your neighbor. فعند حديث لا ضرر ولا ضرار, don't afflict harm or don't allow harm to be afflicted. Likewise, Al-Jar has certain rights in Islam, which is to, the Nabi ﷺ mentioned in most of them in Al-Adab al-Mufrad, and the one who believes in Allah on the Day of Judgment should be hospitable to should treat their neighbors with goodness. But who is a neighbor? Who's considered as a neighbor? What's the definition of a neighbor? How do we define who's a neighbor? Who's a neighbor? Who lives near me? There's many people who live, the entire building lives near me. نعم. جميل. العلماء اختلفوا في هذه المسألة. Who's a neighbor? According to Hanabila, anyone who prays in the local masjid is considered as neighbor. Sahih, the most authentic way to answer this question is whoever is considered neighbor according to the customs and the culture is a neighbor. So if you consider someone to be neighbor, that's a neighbor considered to you according to customs. That's who has rights above you. تمام. It's called. Let's keep going. وراعي آداب بيوت الناس كغض طرف وكالاستئناس. When you visit someone's house, there's certain etiquettes. Number one, you should seek permission before visiting. You just do not show up in the person's house without the permission. Number two, while reaching the house, you should knock or ring the bell no more than 3 times. So you ring the bell, no one answers. After a while, ring it again, no one answers. 3rd time, you ring it again, and no one answers. And you know someone is there, you can hear people speaking inside. Just come back, return back to your house. From the etiquettes, you're not persistent in trying to enter. If someone does not open the door, even if they invited you, just turn back. It makes sense? And you can do the same qiyas on calling, on phones. If you try to call someone, yeah, and they don't pick up, don't call more than 3 times. قياسا على نفسه. It's called قياس الشبه. Likewise, there's other etiquettes. If someone opens the door, after you ring the bell, you should always try to stand to the left of the door. And when he opens the door, do not try to raise your gazes what's inside the house until he gives you the permission to enter the house. So you ring the bell, stay to the left side of the door. Because the door, when you open it, it's going to be to the right side. You can see the gap from the right side. And you should always keep your gazes lowered until he allows you to enter. And once you enter the house, do not move from one room to another until you seek permission. Likewise, you should never, ever open other people's cupboards, compartments, anything without permission. Anything. When you visit someone's house. These are certain adab and etiquettes. It's mentioned in the Sunnah. All of them, this is there in Al-Adab al-Mufrad of Imam al-Bukhari. طيب. وأكرم الضيف وكن مبتسما أنصر أخاك آثرا مسلما. I'll just quickly finish it off, okay? You should honor the guest. Okay, who's a guest? Who's considered as a guest? What's the definition of a guest? لا حد. طيب. Guest in Islam is someone who comes from outside the city you live in, intending to meet you. These are the 2 awsaf. So someone, like example, my best friend who lives in Ottawa tries to come to my, city. Then he's not a guest, he's considered za'ir. But a dhaif is someone who comes from outside the city you live in, not necessarily the country, because al-bilad, in the fuqaha of Islam, they used to understand it as a city, what we understand as a city. So Mecca is a balad, nowadays we consider it as a city. Medina is a balad ukhra, it's considered a city as well. Anyone who is coming to you from outside your city, intending to meet you, he has certain rights. You should host him and be hospitable to him for 1 day. And the complete way to host him is for 3 days. تمام. وكن مبتسمة, smiling. طبعا Abdullah bin Mubarak used to say that بشاشة الوجه and طلاقة الوجه is the أصل, the lub of حسن الخلق. And it's also صدقة كما نقله عليه الصلاة والسلام. طيب انصر أخاك آثرا مسلما. طبعا what's it called? Aiding your Muslim brother in the times of need is from the genuine etiquettes one can observe. طبعا no one likes to ask favor or let alone say that they need you. So when someone does ask for favor, take it as a sign of respect and amana, a trust, and try to fulfill it by maintaining etiquette. And how do we maintain etiquette and help someone? After we help someone, we do not remind them that we have ever helped them. Yeah, or spread that we have helped this person. If you aid someone, do not go around the city and saying, oh, I have helped this person, I've aided this person. That's like one of the traits that's really disgusting. Next thing is, you should not remind the person that you have aided them ever, even if you guys get in an argument or in a petty fight. You should never mention that you have ever aided that person before. So you aid someone, ibtighan li wajhillah, khalas. You helped him for the sake of Allah, khalas, that's done. Anything goes wrong between you, don't say, oh, remember I helped you that day, and this is how you're treating me. That's not from etiquette. طيب, what's it called? آثرا مسلما, and always give precedence to Muslims over yourself. This is the trait of selflessness. The Salaf used to say, from the ways a person is selfless is if they're loved in their childhood a lot. They can be like those who possess the character of selflessness are those who are usually loved in the childhood a lot. For you to love someone, you should be loved. الود يتوارث كما نقله البخاري في هذا المفرد. تمام. حافظ على الأذكار في الصباح وفي المساء تحظى بالفلاح. Oh, sorry, I messed up. What's it called? Bait. عن كل ما يسوء كن عفيفا. Stay away from everything that is what's it called? Evil, such as فواحش, like haram relationships, zina, and so on and so forth. حافظ على الصحة كن نظيفة. Maintain good health by being physically active. Likewise, maintain good hygiene by smelling good, wearing good clothes, and keeping yourself clean. And what's it called? Maintaining the khisal al-fitra, which is to, like, such as clipping your nails, cutting the, what's it called? Clipping your nails and cutting your mustache, and so on and so forth. تمام. حافظ على الأذكار في الصباح وفي المساء تحظى بالفلاح. You should observe the adhkar, which is in the morning and in the evening. When does the morning start in Islam? When does the morning start? You guys like, oh, بعد الفجر. طيب, when does the evening start? Okay, when does the new day start? بعد المغرب. تمام. So المساء, أذكار المساء, يعني you say it after المساء, after عصر. What's it called? This thing, what's it called? الصباح, it starts after fajr. And the new day starts after maghrib. The reason why I'm saying is, certain times you go to certain countries, تستغرب. People think like 12 a.m. is the new day and stuff. They think in that Western way. Because when you go to Hajj, and we have something called Rami al-Jamarat. Yeah, and you have to throw rocks for 3 days. And you'll see many people, they just, as soon as the 12 a.m. comes, they throw their Jamarat. Yani, and they go back. Oh, alhamdulillah, I did Hajj. Your Hajj, you have left out from the wajibat al-Hajj. 12 a.m. is on the new day for us. So what's it called? They end up doing big mistakes in Hajj, and they have no clue about it. Certain mistakes, it has them. You have to pay a penalty for it. للأسف يعني, because lack of knowledge, many people, Allah المستعان. طيب, إذا عطست فاحمدن الله وشمتا من حمد الإله. طيب. From the etiquettes that needs to be maintained while you're sneezing is, number one, you cover your face with your garments or your face with your mouth, at least when you're sneezing, so that you don't spread everything around. Okay. Number two is you say Alhamdulillah after you finish sneezing. Okay. Number three, if you hear someone sneezing, what do we say? Yarhamukallah. Yeah. Okay. And if you want to reply back to it, you can say Yahdikumullah wa yuslih balakum. Likewise, if someone sneezes more than 3 times, you just make dua for shifa. You don't say Yarhamukallah more than once. So if someone sneezes, you say Yarhamukallah. Okay. طيب. Now, if he sneezes second time or third time, you don't say, you don't repeat it. Yeah, you just make dua for shifa for him. تمام. Last couple of أبيات حتى نكمل. What's it called? على اليمين طاهرا نم باكرا وكن لأذكار المنام ذاكرا. What's it called? Sleep on your right in the state of purity, because sleeping in the state of wudu, the angels seek forgiveness for you. Nam bakira, sleep early. Okay, what's it called? Right after Isha, that's what the Salaf used to do. Likewise, the ulama used to say that if the last third of the night has entered and you have stayed awake and it's just before Fajr, then it's not allowed for you to sleep, because it's most likely that you'll miss Fajr if you sleep. And they say al-madhinna يأخذ حكم المئنة. طيب, what's it called? نم باكرا وكل أذكار المنام ذاكرا. And before you sleep, you should say the adhkar of what's it called? Before sleeping. There's many. What's it called? اللهم باسمك وموت وأحيا باسمك ربي وضعت جنبي وبك أرفعه. Many. All mentioned. The best books for al-adhkar is Kitab al-Adhkar للنووي or Kitab al-Du'a للطبراني. Every single dua you can think of, it's there in those two books. The adhkar of Noam, some of them, it's sunnah to say it while you're laying down. So you should not say it while you're sitting. So such as Allahumma aslamtu nafsi ilayk wa fawwadtu amri ilayk wa wajjahtu wajhi ilayk wa alja'tu dhahri ilayk. Those adhkar, you say it while you're laying down. تمام. مما يلي كل باليمين سمي في أول ثم أحمدا في الختم. طيب. What's it called? Etiquettes pertaining to eating are categorized into three. Number one, that which is specific before eating. Number two, that which is specific while eating. And number three, that which is specific after eating. Okay, طيب. Before eating, we must say it. We should say Bismillah. And it's not a sunnah to add on to Bismillah. You should not say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You should say Bismillah. That's it, a tasmiyah. That's what sunnah. That's what Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam has taught us. Yeah? And we stick to what Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam taught us. Okay? Another thing is, what's important is we should utter it. We cannot say it in our mind. The Arab used to say that at-talaffuz wa juz'un min al-dhikr. But if someone comes to prayer and says, like just says Allahu Akbar in his head and is praying, or reads Quran by looking, and he's not moving his lips or tongue, he's not rewarded. And someone who prays without moving their tongue or lips, his salah is invalid. The ulama used to say, the Arab used to understand al-qira'ah as your tongue should move, your lips should move, and there should be some sort of voice or breath. Like alhamdulillah. That's what they used to understand as. So, and it's also sunnah to say Bismillah a little bit aloud so that you can notify others. كما نقله again al-Bukhari في الأدب المفرد. Most of these hadith, everything's in الأدب المفرد. What's it called? If you forget saying Bismillah in the beginning, you should try to say Bismillahi awwalahu wa akhirahu كما نقله عائشة رضي الله عنها. طيب, what's it called? While eating, the etiquette that should be maintained is that one should use right hand. And if there's no need of using spoon, the scholars used to also say that it's more emphasized to use the hands. Only when there's a need, you should go back to using a spoon. Again, when you're using spoon as well, you should use the right hand. The ulama differ, what's the hukum of eating with left hand? Some scholars, and the most majority of the scholars, go to a tahrim. That it's haram. Sorry, majority go to it's makruh, but the most authentic opinion is that it's haram. Because Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam has compared it to the act of shaitan. And the usuliyun, they say that anything that's compared to act of shaitan is haram. Likewise, what's it called? You should always, while eating, stick to the side and the janib where you're in. You should not throw your hands across the plate or somewhere. This is, of course, specific if you're eating in a dish or a tray where everyone is eating together. If you have your own plate, that's not a problem. Likewise, if you're together and there's different dishes in different places, you can put your hands in different places. That's not a problem. And right after you finish, once you're done eating, there's two etiquettes. Number one, you should say Alhamdulillah, and there's other adhkar, which is there again, and Imam Nawawi has mentioned. And finally, to lick your fingers. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam used to always lick his fingers, the tip of his fingers after he finished. And it's also very important that you do not place your hands back into the plate once you lick your fingers. So licking the fingers is done after the food is finished, after you finished eating. You finish eating, lick the tips of your fingers. The Arabs used to take it as a sign of affection when they used to eat with people. So whenever Nabi ﷺ used to eat with his companions, with his wives, after he finished, he used to lick his fingers and خلاص, wash his hands. And finally, the Nazim, he says, أحمده جل مصليا على نبينا يا ربي نظمي فاقبلا. So the poet, he seeks acceptance and asks Allah to accept his poetry as this is ibadah. And the asl of ibadah is accepted based on sincerity and mutaba'ah. And all Muslims, they hope their actions and good deeds are accepted, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. Accepting khawfan min Allah tabarak, like we have mentioned, due to fear of Allah of not being accepted, he made the dua. And by that we by that we end this poetry. Wallahu alam, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Barakallahu feekum. Jazakumullah khair for attending. Inshallah. May Allah reward our Sheikh Fahad. Right now we'll be starting with our Sheikh Abdul Hayy bin ta'ala. Our brother Abdul Hayy. Barakallahu feekum wa jazakumullah khair.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد ومن تبع أحسن الدين فقهنا في الدين والتأويل ونفعنا ما علمتنا وعنفعنا علما. So Jazakumullah khairan to Sheikh Fahad. Alhamdulillah, I think we all benefited quite a bit. One of the things that he mentioned was concerning the books. So if brothers could take the books off the floor, that would be better, inshallah. As far as my lecture, if you will, my lecture is based on a small book that was written by Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali. I mean, I could go over who he was and so on and so forth, but we simply don't have enough time. But he was a great scholar of Islam. He was one of the students of Ibn Qayyim, who was one of the students of Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah. And he wrote many different books about many different topics. And I recommend that if you ever get the chance to read any of his works, you read them. In a general sense, say there's about 4 people that whatever works they have, you should try to read them. You have Shaykh Islam Taymiyyah, you also have Ibn Qayyim, then you also have the works of Ibn Rajab, and then you also have the works of Ibn Jawzi. These 4 authors, you should always try to read their works. The work that we're going to be going over here is the explanation of a hadith that's narrated by Qalb bin Malik, that the Prophet ﷺ is narrated to have said, مَا دِئْبَانِ جَاعَانِ أُرْسِلَا فِي غَنَمٍ بِأَوْصَدَهَا مِنْ حِرْصِ الْمَرْءِ عَلَى شَرَفِ وَالْمَالِ لِدِينِهِ. The Prophet ﷺ is narrated to have said that 2 hungry wolves sent into a pack of sheep is not more destructive for someone's religion than someone being greedy for money and someone being greedy for fame. So this hadith, inshallah, is what we're going to be speaking about. And more or less, we're going to be speaking about the dangers of money and the dangers of fame, and how these 2 things can have a negative effect on your religion that's worse than the effect that the destruction that 2 hungry wolves would have on a pack of sheep. Before going into that, we don't have that much time, but before going into that, I just want to talk about the importance of the concept of cleaning our hearts, which is a long topic in and of itself, but inshallah we'll highlight a few things. First and foremost, Allah says, as we all know, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. Allah said on the Day of Judgment, money and children will not benefit us, but rather the only thing that's going to benefit us is those who come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a clean heart. So the greatest thing we can come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with is our heart. The greatest thing we can come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with is our heart. More specifically, a heart that is clean. And we all know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ said, ألا إن في جسد مضغة إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله وإذا فسدت فسد الجسد كله ألا هو القلب. That verily there's a piece of flesh in the body. If it's good, the whole body is good. If it's bad, the whole body is bad. Verily that is the heart. And based on these ahadith and these ayat and many others, the scholars have mentioned like Ibn Qayyim that عبودية القلب أعظم من عبودية الجوارح. Ibn Qayyim, he mentions that the slavitude, the worship of the heart, is greater than the worship of the limbs. That the slavitude of the heart, the worship of the heart, is greater than the worship of the limbs. فمعرفة أحكام القلوب أهم من معرفة أحكام الجوارح. So us knowing the rulings of our hearts is more important than us learning the rulings of the body. Meaning us learning how our heart functions, and the different diseases that can afflict our hearts, and the different acts of worship of the hearts and how they function is more important than us learning the physical actions. Because two people might be praying, two people might be doing a physical act of worship, but the thing that will determine whether one is greater than the other is what's in the heart. فإن الأعمال لا تتفاضل بصورها وعددها وإنما تتفاضل بتفاضل ما في القلوب فرجلان مقامهما في الصف واحد وبينهما تفاضل ما بين السماء والأرض كما قال. So Ibn Qayyim, he mentions that actions are not greater than other actions based on their appearance, but rather they're greater based on what's in the heart of the individual that was doing it. So two people might be praying, they're both in the first row, they're both behind the imam, but between them in terms of reward is a difference similar to the heavens and the earth. One person's praying for the sake of Allah, he has khushu'. The other person's praying because his father told him to pray. His father told him to be there. So actions are greater than other actions based on what's in the heart of the individual that's doing them. That's one of the reasons why learning the ahkam of the qalb, learning the rulings of the heart is so important. Likewise, Ibn Qayyim, he mentions that the actions of the heart are wajibatun fi kulli waqt. The actions of the heart are obligatory in every single moment. Sometimes I have to pray, sometimes I don't have to pray. Sometimes I have to fast, sometimes I don't have to fast. But there's never a moment in our lives where we don't have to love Allah, or we don't have to have trust in Allah, or we don't have to have hope in Allah, or we don't have to have fear in Allah. So the worship of the qalb is wajibatun fi kulli waqt, is obligatory in every single scenario. And that's why Ibn mentions very nice lines of poetry when he says, أَتَرَوْنَ هَذِهِ هِجْرَةُ الْأَبْدَانِ لَا بَلْ وَاللَّهِ هِجْرَةُ الْإِيمَانِ قَطْعُ الْمَسَافَةِ بِالْقُلُوبِ إِلَيْهِ فِي دَرَكِ الْأُصُولِ مَعَ فُرُوعِ فَذَانِ أَبَدًا إِلَيْهِ حُكْمُهَا لَا غَيْرِهِ فَالْحُكْمُ مَا حَكْمَتْ بِهِ النَّصَّانِ. Ibn Qayyim mentions that our journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the journey of the heart. قَطْعُ الْمَسَافَةِ بِالْقُلُوبِ إِلَيْهِ. That the way that we cover the distance between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with our heart first and foremost. Because that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking at first and foremost. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنْظُرُ إِلَى صُوَرِكُمْ وَلَا إِلَى أَمْوَالِكُمْ وَلَكِنْ يَنْظُرُ إِلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't look at our appearances, He doesn't look at our wealth, but rather He looks at our hearts. And that's why Ibn Rajab, he mentions that أفضل الناس من سلك طريق النبي وخواص أصحابه في الاجتهاد في الأحوال القلبية والاقتصاد في الأعمال البدنية فإن سفر الآخرة يقطع بسير القلوب لا بسير الأبدان. Ibn Rajab, the great scholar that we're going to study his work, in another book he mentions that the best of people are those who followed the path of the Prophet and those close companions. Because the path of the Prophet and the close companions is striving hard in actions of the heart and being balanced when it comes to actions of the limbs. فَإِنَّ سَفَرَ الْآخِرَةِ يُقْطَعُ بِسَيْرِ الْقُلُوبِ لَا بِسَيْرِ الْأَبْدَانِ. Because our journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is done with our heart first and foremost and not with our body. And that's why many of the scholars, like Imam Muzani and others, they mentioned that Abu Bakr مَا سَبَقَهُ مِنْ كَثْرَةِ الصَّلَاةِ وَلَا كَثْرَةِ الصِّيَامِ. That Abu Bakr, the thing that made him greater than all the other Sahabas was not the amount of praying and the amount of fasting that he used to do. وَلَكِنْ بِشَيْءٍ وَقَرَ فِي قَلْبِهِ. But the thing that made Abu Bakr so great is something that he had in his heart, or something that he has in his heart. And some of the scholars have mentioned that what that thing is مَحَبَّةُ وَنَصِيحَةٌ لِخَلْقِهِ. That thing that made Abu Bakr so great that he had in his heart was his deep love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his sincere wanting of goodness for Muslims. That he always wanted the best for all Muslims. And because of these two things, that's what made him so great, but not the actual physical amounts of praying and fasting. And that's why if you look at the tabi'un, the scholars of tariq, they're going to mention this. If you look at the generation that came after the Sahabas, in a general sense, they did more physical acts of worship than the actual Sahabas themselves. Like if you look at some of these great figures, Hassan al-Basri, Imam al-Juwayni, Junaydi, and so on and so forth, Junayd al-Baghdadi, and others, yani. If you look at these tabi'i, Hassan al-Basri, all these great figures, a lot of them, they actually, if you look at their lives, they used to do a lot more physical acts of worship than the Sahabas, in a general sense. But the Sahabas were still greater. One of the reasons was because of what we're talking about right now. إِنَّ سَفَرًا آخِرَةً يُقْطَعُ بِسَيْرِ الْقُلُوبِ لَا بِسَيْرِ الْأَبْدَانِ. So again, we could spend a lot more time on this, but it's just to highlight the importance of the heart and focusing on rectifying the heart and learning the ahkam of the qulub and so on and so forth. Now, in terms of tazkiyat al-nafs, how to purify our hearts, this is the second point. So how? Like if we know the importance of cleaning our hearts, how do we do it, right? Well, that's the point of the entire conference, right? But briefly speaking, I'll give you some points here. Point number one is understanding that only Allah can pure your heart. Allah says if it wasn't for His blessing and His mercy, none of you will be able to purify themselves, or rather it's Allah who purifies whoever He wills. So the first thing we have to understand when it comes to purifying our soul is that only Allah can do it. And the only way we can get to it is with Allah, is by making dua. So the greatest way to purify our hearts is always turning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify our hearts and to help us. It's the most important thing. Always be making dua to Allah and understand that, do we take the means? Of course, but your heart's connected to Allah. The second thing is Allah clearly told us the cure for what's in our hearts. Allah says there has come to you an admonishment for what is in, an admonishment from your Lord, and a healing for that which is in your chest. So Allah clearly mentions that the Quran is shifa, is a healing for us. First and foremost, of course, for our hearts. So always spending, the more time you spend with the Quran, the better you're going to see yourself become in terms of the state of your heart. But obviously what's meant here is using the Quran the way it was supposed to be used, which is by you reflecting on it. You just reciting the Quran without having any clue what you're reciting is not going to help your heart. But you reciting the Quran with tadabbur, pondering, reflecting, applying what you're reading to your life, and reflecting how these things can be applied to your life, you doing that will help you, right? Right? A book that's full of blessing that was sent down to you for you to ponder on it, right? But we can talk about the concept of tadabbur, but we just don't have enough time. But my main point here is that when we talk about the Quran being a cure for your heart, you have to use the Quran the way Allah prescribed it, which is by you pondering on it. You just reciting it without knowing what you're reciting, are you going to get ajr? Yes, but it's not going to purify your heart, okay? That's point number two. Point number three is what Ibn Qayyim mentions, that Sada al-qalb bi-amrayni wa jala'ahu bi-amrayni. Ibn Qayyim mentions that our hearts become resty with two things, and they become pure with two things. Our hearts, they become resty with sins and with heedlessness. The more we sin, the more black dots are put upon our hearts, and the more our heart becomes dead. The more we're heedless of Allah and we're busy in this dunya, the more our heart's going to become dead. So the opposite of these two things is what's going to help you. The opposite of singing is istighfar. The opposite of sinning is istighfar. Make sure every single day you're saying at least 100 istighfar. Wallah inni astaghfirullah atubu fil-yawm fi ilayhi fil-yawm akthar min 70 marra. Okay, right? The Prophet ﷺ said that verily I make tawbah to Allah and I make istighfar to more than 70 times a day. So make sure that there is a portion in your day where you're making istighfar, at least 100 times. That's the minimum. That's number one. And the opposite of heedlessness is remembrance. So the more you're doing remembrance of Allah, morning adhkar, evening adhkar, as Shaykh Fahad mentioned, and so on and so forth, the more that's going to help your heart. The last thing, before we actually start the actual book, is Ibn Jawzi in Sayyid al-Khatir. Ibn Jawzi, you can go search up who he was, I don't have enough time to explain. In Sayyid al-Khatir, he mentions a very powerful statement when he says, رأيت أن الاشتغال بالفقه والسماع الحديث لا يكاد يكفي في صلاح قلبي إلا أن ينزج برقائق والنذر في سير السلف الصالحين لأنهم تناولوا مقصود النقل وخرجوا من سورة فعل ممعول بها إلى ذوق معانيها ومراد منها. Ibn Jawzi mentions in Sayyid al-Khatir, Ibn Jawzi was a great scholar. He mentions that I studied fiqh more or less. and I studied hadith. But I realized that it wasn't sufficient in rectifying my heart, except if it was mixed, the study of hadith and fiqh was mixed with heart softeners. And likewise, looking at the lives of the Salaf. So my last recommendation for you would be, make sure that you have some time where you spend time with heart softeners. The greatest heart softener is the Quran, but likewise, you know, the works of Ibn Qayyim, the works of so on and so forth, they can be beneficial, but they should never busy you from the Quran. The speech of Ibn Qayyim is not anywhere near the speech of our Creator. So never get that, because that's a trap of shaitan. And then the other thing is looking at the lives of the Salaf. Go read the biographies of the Sahabas, of the Tabi'un, whether it be male or female. This will help you. In fact, Ibn Jawzi mentions in another part in Sayyid al-Khatir that لَيْسَ شَيْءٌ أَنْفَعَ لِطَارِبٍ عَنْ مِنَ النَّظَرِ فِي سِيرِ الصَّالِحِينَ. Ibn Jawzi mentions in another place in Sayyid al-Khatir that the most beneficial thing for a student to knowledge is looking at the lives of the Salaf. So these 4 things are my advice to you in a general sense when it comes to the concept of purifying the hearts. When we come to the actual book itself, as we mentioned, the book, it explains the hadith of the Prophet that mentions that 2 hungry wolves sent into a pack of sheep is not more destructive to our religion, or for someone's is not more destructive to a pack of sheep than a man being greedy, or a person being greedy for fame and money. So we're going to talk about money first. We're not going to go over the actual book. The actual book is like, it's too big for us to go over. We don't have enough time. You can find the translation for it, though. There's an English translation for it online. I think it's the Dispraise of Money and Wealth by Ibn Rajab. If you search it up on Google, you should find it. If you know Arabic, of course, just search up Yani Shar Hadith, Madi Abani Jai'ain Wasina fi Ghanam, Ibn Rajab. So I do recommend you guys read the actual book. If you're an English speaker, you can read it. If you're an Arabic speaker, you can also read it. It's very beneficial. You'll find in it what you won't find in other places. I will go over some portions of it if I have enough time. But I'll pretty much what I did is I tried to summarize the main points here. So I'll go over the main points. If we have enough time, I'll cover some important passages, and then we'll go from there. So when it comes to the first one, which is money, we have to first understand something, which is how we should view money, right? The Prophet ﷺ said, the Prophet ﷺ said that a great thing is righteous money for a righteous man. So money in of itself is not a problem. Right? Money in and of itself is not a problem. The Prophet ﷺ, or Allah refers to money as being khair. Right? إِنَّهُ لِحُبٍّ خَيْرٍ شَدِيدٍ. Allah says mankind is for the love of khair, good, I mean money, shadid. Shadid could mean bakhil here. So money in of itself is not the problem. Okay? If it's used by a good person, it's good. If it's using good things, it's good. The problem is when someone becomes greedy for it. The Prophet said in the hadith that's authentic in Sunnah Abi Majah, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَجْمِلُوا فِي الطَّلَبِ فَإِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَن تَمُوتَ حَتَّى تَسْتَوْفِيَ رِزْقًا وَأَبْطَعَ عَنْهَا فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَجْمِلُوا فِي الطَّلَبِ خُذُوا مَا حَلَّ وَدَعُوا مَا حَرَمَ. The Prophet said, O people, fear Allah and seek your provision in a beautiful manner. The Prophet did not say don't seek your provision. Seek your provision, seek your money in a beautiful manner though. Meaning don't go into haram things. Don't humiliate yourself. Some people, they'll humiliate themselves just to get a bit more money. Likewise, don't overburden yourself. Like some people, they're almost going to kill themselves just trying to get a few more bucks, 3, 4 jobs, and so on and so forth. It's not necessary. So the Prophet said, أَجْمِلُوا فِي الطَّلَبِ. Beautify yourself in how you seek this money. Why? فَإِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَن تَمُوتَ حَتَّى تَسْتَوْفِيَ رِزْقًا وَأَبْطَعَ عَنْهَا. Because no soul is going to die until it gets all of its provision. Everybody here, including myself, Allah already wrote down how much we're going to get. Before we were even born, the angel wrote down how much we're going to get. We're not going to get more than that, and we're not going to get less than that. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَأَجْمِلُوا فِي الطَّلَبِ. So the conclusion is, fear Allah and beautify yourself when you're seeking this money. Don't think that by cutting corners and sacrificing your deen, you're going to get more money. You're not. You're still going to get the same amount of money that Allah decreed for you. In fact, you might get a bit less because now you're starting doing haram. طيب? So this is how we should try to view when it comes to money. That money of itself is not the problem, but it's how we view money and whether we're greedy for it. The Prophet said, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ أَسْلَمَ وَرُزِكَ كَفَافًا وَقَنَّعَهُ اللَّهُ بِمَا أَتَاهُ. The Prophet said that succeeded has the person who has submitted himself, and he accepted Islam, and has been provided kafafan, what is sufficient for him, what is sufficient for him. You have enough to put money on to put food on the table, buy some nice stuff, and not more than what's necessary, not less. You just have enough. Successful is a person who has accepted Islam, وَرُزِكَ كَفَافًا, and he's been provided what's sufficient for that individual, وَقَنَّعَهُ اللَّهُ بِمَا أَتَاهُ, and Allah has made you content with what He's given you. If you have these three things, the Prophet ﷺ told us you have succeeded. So success is not how much money you have in your bank account, because we're living in a society where you always need a nicer car, a nicer bag, a nicer kada, a nicer kada. That's not what success is. Success is these three things, as our Prophet ﷺ told us. You accept Islam, you submit yourself to Allah, Allah gives you what's sufficient for you, and you're content with that. طيب? Now, some people, they'll bring you different narrations that, Abu Bakr was wealthy, Uthman was wealthy, Abdul Rahman ibn Auf was wealthy, which is no doubt about it. There are many Sahabas who are wealthy, and being wealthy is not a problem. But just because they're wealthy doesn't mean that that's an excuse for us to go and start driving fast cars just to drive fast cars, not fancy, luxurious, I don't know what, Abu Bakr was rich, yes. He had some money, if you will. But he gave all of his money for the sake of Allah's Messenger. And when the Prophet asked him, what have you left your family with? He said, with Allah's Messenger. Uthman had money, yes, but he gave a huge amount of his money for the Battle of Tabuk. Abdul Rahman was wealthy, yes, but let's see, how did he view his wealth? If you read all the Salihin, Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, after the Prophet had died, later on, once food was brought to him, Abdul Rahman ibn Auf was this wealthy Sahaba. Food was brought to him, and he said, قُتِلَ مُصْعَبْ ibn Umar. He said, Mus'ab ibn Umar, who was one of his companions, he died. And when he died, we didn't have enough sheets to cover his entire body. When we used to cover his head, his feet would be showing. When we used to cover his feet, his head would be showing. And he was better than me. And he said, Hamza was killed, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, and he was better than me. And he said, and now this dunya has been open to us. I fear that the reward of our good deeds has been rushed to us. He started crying and didn't eat the food. So is Abdul Rahman ibn Auf wealthy? Yes, but he didn't use it to go around with fast camels and horses and have a party. So being wealthy is fine, but don't use these great individuals as an excuse for you to follow your desires. Leave them. If you want to do that, fine, that's up to you. But don't use the deen and try to twist it for your own pleasure, طيب? So the greatest way, not the greatest, but one of the ways we can conclude the Islamic perspective of money, if you will, is what Ibn Taymiyyah mentions. That he mentions, بل يجب أن يكون المال عند المؤمن بمنزلة المحل الذي يقضي فيه حاجته ولا يتعلق به قلبه نهائيا. Ibn Taymiyyah, he mentions that the believer should view money the same way he views the toilet. The believer should view money the same way he views toilet. I go and I need it. I don't want to stay there for too long either. And I do what I have to do and I keep on going. And Ibn Taymiyyah mentions your heart should never become attached to money. Because when your heart becomes attached to money, you're going to start doing things for that money. And you doing things for that money will take from your ubudiyyah to Allah, so then a portion of your servitude and your submission will be given to other than Allah, will be given to this money. And that's what the Prophet meant when he says, that ruin is the slave of the gold coin, and ruin is the slave of the silver coin. So this is how we should view money, guys. Okay? It's there, we use it like we use the bathroom. We're only going to get what Allah has decreed for us. Do we go on, we seek it? Yes, but not to a point that we humiliate ourselves or we cut corners or we do things that we shouldn't be doing. Right? Going into the actual book itself, briefly speaking, Ibn Rajab, he mentions that people deviate when it comes to money in two different ways. The way they seek it or the way they spend it. Some people will start seeking money in haram ways. So they'll go into riba, they'll go into jobs that are haram for them, and so on and so forth. This is one way that people will go astray when it comes to money. Another way that people will go astray when it comes to money is either not spending it, they'll be very stingy, they won't spend it on their family, they just want to see their bank account numbers go up, or they'll spend it on haram things. Right? So some people, they combine both. Some people, they get money from haram sources and they spend it on haram things. Some people, they only fall short in one. You'll find some people, they get haram money. They might have a restaurant that sells alcohol, but they actually use that money to go to Hajj. Whether Hajj is accepted or not, that's another topic. But some people, they combine both. Some people that might only have one wrong. So a lot of Muslims, their job's halal, but they might be spending their money in haram ways. This is another way that people will go astray. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he warned us many times, so many hadith to talk about the warning against money. The Prophet said, يعني واتقوا الشح فإن الشح أهلك ما كان قبلكم حملهم وسفكوا دماءهم واستحلوا محارمهم. The Prophet said, يعني I warn you from shuh, right? And shuh, Ibn Faris, he mentioned in Maqayis al-Lugha that shuh is al-bukhlu ma'a al-hirs. Al-bukhlu ma'a al-hirs. Ibn Faris, he mentioned in Maqayis al-Lugha, he was a great scholar of the Arabic language, he mentions that shuh is stinginess mixed with greed. Stinginess and greed. So al-bukhlu or bakhil is someone who's stingy. Al-shuh is someone who has shuh, yani, is someone who is stingy and greedy at the same time. There are other like definitions of shuh, but this is the easiest one to understand. That shuh is stinginess and greed at the same time. So the Prophet said, I warn you from shuh, stinginess and greediness. Why? Because it destroyed those who came before you. It led them to kill each other and led them to go against those things Allah had made sacred. How many Muslims are killing each other for money? Around the world. Whether that be in actual wars or just on the streets. How many Muslims are cutting ties with kinship, are robbing, are stealing from each other for a few bucks? Right? And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, Wallahi, man faqra akhsha alaykum. By Allah, it's not poverty that I fear for you. ولكني أخشى عليكم أن تبسط الدنيا كما بسطت على مكان قبلكم كما بسطت على مكان قبلكم فتنافسوها كما تنافسوها فتهلككم كما أهلكتهم. The Prophet said, Wallahi, it's not poverty that I fear for my nation, but I fear for them that this dunya will be open to them, so they'll start chasing after it like those who came before them chased after it, and it will ruin them like it ruined, and it ruined them like it ruined them, like those who came before. So nowadays, Amazon, push of a button, I get whatever I want delivered to my door. I could spend the entire day just on Amazon buying things. This dunya has been open to us. And most Muslims, unfortunately, are rushing for it, they're fighting for it, and they're cutting corners in terms of their deen for it. So we have to be very careful when it comes to money. We don't want to be from those who fall into these ahadith. طيب? So what's the solution for that? What's the solution to not fall into these hadith? Many things you can say, but fundamentally, the Prophet told us, إِنَّ النَّفْسَ لَن تَمُوتَ حَتَّى تَسْتَوْفِيَ رِزْقَهَا. No soul is going to die until it gets everything that was written down for you. We have to understand that. If we understand that, it'll save us a lot of trouble. That I'll go to my job, I'll do my 9 to 5, I'll do whatever I have to do, but at the end of the day, I know Allah is my provider, and I'm only going to get what Allah wrote down for me. طيب? The second thing, and this is a narration that Ibn Rajab brings in the book here by Ibn Mas'ud, and this, honestly speaking, is one of the most powerful statements I've seen, is Ibn Mas'ud, rada anhu. He mentions, al-yaqeen alla turud al-nas bi sakhatillah. Ibn Mas'ud, he says, certainty. For you to be certain in the promise of Allah, for you to be certain in Allah's promise that He's going to provide for you, and Allah's promise that He's the one who's in control, and so on and so forth. For you to have certainty in the existence of Allah, and in that reality that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the provider, means, and then he mentions many different things. Number one, it means that you don't please people by making Allah angry. You being certain that Allah's in control of everything, Allah's my provider, means I'm not going to please you and thus make Allah angry. My boss tells me I need to cut my beard, I'm not going to do it. Why? Because I have certainty that Allah is my provider. So I'm not going to make Allah angry by making you happy. If they tell me I have to take off my hijab or whatever the case may be, I'm not going to make you happy by making Allah angry. Why? Because I have yaqeen, I'm certain in Allah's promise. Likewise, you having certainty in Allah's promise of being providing for you and so on and so forth, is, he continues by saying, وَلَا تَحْسُدَ أَحَدَ عَلَى رِزْقِ اللَّهِ. You don't have envy and jealousy for anybody because of what Allah's guiding them. If that brother has more money than you, it's because Allah willed it. If that brother has more knowledge than you, it's because Allah willed it. If that brother is married before you, it's because Allah willed it. If that sister is married before you, it's because Allah willed it. If that sister has more money than you and a nicer car, it's because Allah willed it. You have certainty that everything comes from Allah. So I'm not going to be jealous over what Allah has given that person has not given me. Likewise, having certainty in Allah's promise And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أَلَّا تَلُومَ أَحَدًا عَلَى مَا لَمْ يُؤْتِكَ اللَّهُ. You don't blame anybody for what Allah has not given you. If I didn't get that opportunity, it's not because my family, it's not because this person, it's not because that person, it's because Allah didn't want it. طيب. Ibn Mas'ud, he continues by saying, فَإِنَّ الرِّزْقَ لَا يَسُوقُ حِرْصُ حَرِيصٍ وَلَا يَدُّ كَرَاتُ كَارِهٍ. Our provision, us being greedy for it, will not bring it to us. Our provision that Allah wrote down, us being greedy for it will not bring it to us. And someone being angry and not wanting us to get it is not going to prevent it from coming to us. Why? Because everything is in the hands of Allah. Right? Then Ibn Mas'ud, he finishes the statement by saying, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِقِسْطِهِ جَعَلَ الْروح وَالْفَرَحِ في رضا ويقين وفي اليقين ورضا وجعل الهم والحزن في الشك والسخط. Ibn Mas'ud, he finishes his statement by saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His justice, He made happiness and ease out of us having certainty and us being pleased. The more we're certain in Allah's promise that He's going to provide for us. وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا عَلَى اللَّهِ رِزْقُهَا. There's no creature on the earth except Allah provides for it. Right? وَيَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. Allah says, if we fear Allah is going to provide for us. The more we have certainty in this, the more happy we're going to be. The more at ease we're going to be. And the more we're pleased with what Allah has given us. Alhamdulillah, Allah gave me this much money, alhamdulillah. Allah gave me this car, alhamdulillah. Allah gave me this, whatever, alhamdulillah. The more we're pleased with that, the more happy we are. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He ends, Ibn Mas'ud saying, He ends by saying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed doubt, or not, Allah has placed doubt, naam, and sadness in us, or sorry, Allah has placed anxiety, stress, and sadness in us being doubtful and in us being angry. The more we're doubtful in Allah's promise, Allah says He's going to provide for us. But are we certain in that, or do we doubt so we go in those haram things? I don't think it's really going to come. I have to do this. I have to put my money here. I have to do this. If we truly were certain, we wouldn't have any anxiety. Allah's going to provide. It's going to come. It's going to come maybe from a way that la yahtasib, I don't know, but it's going to come. But when we're doubtful in Allah's promise, it leads us to be stressful. It leads us to lose sleep. And then likewise, we get angry when we're not pleased with what Allah has given us. We get sad, and we have anxiety, and we have depression, or we're always on Instagram looking at what that other sister has or that other brother has, and we don't focus on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. So this more or less is a conclusion of the topic of money, okay? Which was the first thing that the Prophet said, or one of the two things the Prophet said is going to ruin our deen, more or similar to how a wolf would, or two hungry wolves would destroy a fleet of, or a pack of sheep. Right? Second thing is fame, right? The second thing is fame. And now, Ibn Rajab, he mentions that fame is sought in two different ways. Fame is sought in two different ways. With money and positions, being the president, being the leader, being the whatever, right? Being the one in charge, or being the one that has a lot of money, right? And fame, the fitna of fame is worse than the fitna of money, by the way, because people will give money in order to be famous. So fame is a greater fitna than money itself, because people are willing to give money to get famous. Right? This is the first way that people will seek fame, through positions and money. The second way, which is even worse, is with the deen. Some people will seek knowledge so they can be in my where I'm standing right now, and they're the sheikh, right? They're the one teach, right? They have the cameras or whatever, right? And they have sheikh kada kada, YouTube, Instagram, reminders, everything like that, right? So these are the two ways that people will seek fame, with positions and money, or with the deen through knowledge. We're going to start with seeking fame through positions and money. Allah says in the Quran, تِلْكَ الدَّارُ الْآخِرَةِ نَجْعَلُهَا لِلَّذِينَ لَا يُرِيدُونَ عُلُوًّا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فَسَادًا. Allah says, the abode of the hereafter is for those who don't want to be high in the land, and they don't want to cause corruption. So the hereafter, paradise, is a place for the downtrodden, right? And there are many hadith that show us that the people that are going to the people that enter paradise in a general sense are kullu da'if mutada'af, anyone who's weak. And the people that enter the hellfire, the most of them are the weak The people that accept Islam usually are those that are weak, right? Right? Many of the, if you read the stories of the prophets, many times the people that would follow them were always the weak people, the ones that were poor. To the point that some of them would say, we're gonna follow you, and these weakened, low-born people are following you, right? كذلك ما أتى الذين من قبلهم رسول إلا قالوا ساحر كذلك ما أرسلنا من قبلك في قرية إلا قال مترفوها. Many times Allah says, likewise, we did not send before you into any nation a messenger except that the rich, noble people would reject it, right? So the hereafter in paradise is the place for those who are humble, not for those who want lofty positions and so on and so forth. And that's why there are many hadith talk about not asking for positions of power. The Prophet told Abdurrahman ibn Samura, لا تسأل إمارة فإنك أعطيتها مسألة وكلت إليها وإن أعطيتها غير مسألة وكلت إليها. The Prophet told Abdullah bin Samura, the Sahabi radha anhu, don't ask for positions of leadership. Because if you're given it out of you asking for it, Allah's going to leave you to it. But if you're given that position of leadership, not because you wanted it, but you were pushed to, then Allah's going to aid you in doing it. Likewise, the Prophet said, إِنَّكُمْ سَتَحْرِسُونَ عَلَى الْإِمَارَةِ وَإِنَّهَا سَتَكُونُ نَدَامَةً وَحَسَرَةً. The Prophet said likewise in Sahih Nisa'i, or Sunan Nisa'i, that verily you're going to rush and be greedy for positions of leadership, but it's going to be regret on the Day of Judgment. طيب? So, seeking to be the man, to be the leader, and so on and so forth, and to be the one calling the shots, this is not from the attributes of a believer at all. And it's not from the attributes of the people of paradise. So choose for yourself which abode you want to be in. Do you want to be high and lofty in paradise, or you want to be high and lofty in this dunya that is nothing? طيب. The second way that people will seek fame is with the deen, right? And this is through people seeking knowledge in order to attain positions of leadership, or to be the one who's giving the khutbah and so on and so forth, or to be the one who's famous, right? The student of knowledge, or the shaykh, the ustad, whatever the case may be. It can also take the form of people acting as if they're very devout worshippers, but they're just doing it so that people will say, oh, mashallah, he's praying all the time, mashallah, she's wearing niqab, mashallah, she's kada, kada, kada. So it can take different forms, but fundamentally what it is that you made your portion of Allah this dunya. وَيْلٌ لِمَنْ جَعَلَ حَظَّهُ مِنَ اللَّهِ dunya. As many Salaf said, woe to the person who made his portion of Allah this dunya. And woe to the person who made their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a means, or their supposed relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a means to gain this dunya. And this is worse than the first person. The first person, he's seeking the dunya with the dunya, money and positions of power. This person is seeking the dunya with the hereafter. Don't seek the dunya of the hereafter. If you want to be you want to seek this dunya, go. Be a dunya guy if you want to be a dunya girl if you want. But do it with the dunya, through money and whatever. Don't do it with the deen. This is very, very scary. When it comes to knowledge specifically, and we're going to focus on knowledge, people will seek this dunya, people will seek this dunya with the deen for two different reasons. Either they're going to seek with knowledge and with their religiosity, they're going to seek money, or they're going to seek fame. And this is why the Prophet said, in what's narrated by Abu Dawood, that من تعلم علما مما يبتغي به وجه الله لا يتعلمه إلا يصيب به عرضا من الدنيا لم يجد عرف الجنة. Right? The Prophet said that the person who seeks knowledge that should only be sought for the sake of Allah, but seeks it in order to get something of this dunya, this person will not smell the fragrance of paradise. So, if you want to seek knowledge, but don't do it in order for you to get money. Some people will seek knowledge and will be giving even da'wah just for the purpose of money. Every khutbah, I need to get this much. Every video, pay me, I'll do the video, I'll do the reel, I'll do the kada. Right? This is one way. The more common way, the scarier way, is for fame. People will seek knowledge in order to be famous, to be the sheikh, to be the ustad, to be the kada, whatever the case may be. The Prophet also highlighted this in a narration in Tirmidhi. من تعلم العلم ليباهي به العلماء أو يماري به السفهاء أو يصرف به وجوه الناس إليه فهو في النار. The Prophet said that the person who seeks knowledge in order to debate with the scholars, or to argue with the foolish people, or to make people's faces direct towards him, this person will be in the hellfire. So unfortunately, especially nowadays, A lot of people seek knowledge in order to be the ustad, right? And a lot of times, unfortunately, someone being successful in knowledge is based on whether they're giving classes, they have a YouTube channel, they have an Instagram, they have reels and everything like that. And everybody wants to, as soon as they learn something, have to let the entire world know on Instagram. But their own family doesn't know basic things. Their own community doesn't know basic things. It's very scary, it's very common nowadays because of the ease of things, right? And as Abu Ishaq mentions, yani, subhanAllah, inshallah, will come to me. So in order to solve this issue of seeking worldly things of this knowledge, there are many different things that Ibn Rajab mentions. Where is Omar? How much time do I have left? Omar, how much time do I have left? 15 minutes? 20 minutes? Yeah? Okay, okay, so inshallah we have enough time. So in order to save ourselves from this calamity of seeking وإن أطيت فيه طويل باع وقال الناس إنك قد سبقت فلا تأمن سواء عنه بتوبيخ علمت فما علمت فرأس الله تقوى حقا وليس بأن يقال قد رأست. That's the lines of poetry I was looking for. Abu Ishaq mentions in his poem that if you're given knowledge and people start saying, mashallah, you're making progress and so on and so forth, that never feel safe when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask on the day of judgment. You had knowledge, so what did you do with it? So the epitome and the essence of knowledge is you fearing Allah, and now people saying that you're the sheikh. Now, as Hassan al-Basri says, yani, don't make your portion of this knowledge that people say you're sheikh. That's the only thing you get out of this knowledge, that people say you're sheikh. Other than that, there's nothing else. So in terms of how to find the solution for not seeking this dunya, or not seeking fame through knowledge, the Shaykh mentions many different things. I'm just trying to see what to start off with, because I don't think I have enough time to go over everything. So let me just try to see. Give me a second, guys. One thing he mentions is that when it comes to calling people to Islam, and even when it comes to us helping others, our goal is to guide people to Allah, not to ourselves. Our goal is to guide people to Allah and not to ourselves. And Ibn Rajab, he mentions different narrations about this. One narration that he brings here is Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz was one of the great scholars of Islam, and likewise he was one of the rulers, one of the khalifas of the Umayyad dynasty. But he was a very righteous individual. And he mentions two stories here. He mentions one story is that once Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he wrote a letter to some of his people, if you will. Okay? As the ruler, he wrote a letter to some of his workers, if you will, telling them to let people know to not oppress each other and that we're not going to oppress you and so on and so forth. At the end of the letter, he said, وَلَا تَحْمَدُونِ عَلَى ذَلِكَ. Do not praise me for this, because all of this, me being just in this position of leadership, it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if Allah did not help me, I would have been like those who came before me who weren't just. A clear example of this is once a woman came to this great ruler, Umar ibn Aziz, and the woman had 4 daughters, and all those daughters were orphans because their father was gone. So Umar ibn Aziz, he gave her a portion of money for the first child, and she praised Allah. Then he gave her a portion of money for the second child, and she praised Allah. And then when he was about to give another portion of money for the third daughter, she thanked him. When she thanked him, he told her, split this one with the third one and the fourth one. And he said, when I gave you the 2 first ones, you were praising Allah. So I was giving it to you. But when I gave you the third one, you thanked me. So I'm not going to give you more. What Umar ibn Aziz was trying to make her understand is, it's not about me. I'm giving you this because I'm trying to help you for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's coming from Allah. But as soon as you put me into the equation, I'm not doing it anymore. يطعمون الطعام حبه مسكينا ويتيما واسيرا إنما نطعمكم لوجه الله لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا. Allah says from the characteristics of the believers that there were those that used to give money out of love for it, and they would not give it, and they would give it to the poor and the orphan and the needy. And when they would give it, they would tell the people, I'm not giving you this seeking thanks or seeking reward. Whether you thank me or don't thank me, whether you praise me or don't praise me, or whatever the case may be, reward me or don't reward me, it doesn't matter, because I'm doing it for the sake of Allah, and I'm trying to help you get closer to Allah, not closer to me. I'm just a person that Allah is using as a sabab, as a means to, inshallah, hopefully guide you and I get ajr for it. But me as an individual is not important. This is very important for people to understand, especially nowadays. We're living in celebrity culture. This sheikh, this was that. No cares. These are all just means, Of course, we have respect to our mashayikh, we have respect to our imams. There's no doubt about that. But my main point is not to become attached to personalities and make your deen based on these personalities. This is very scary. Your heart should only be attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you're the one helping others, your goal is to help them get to Allah, not get to you. So this is one of the things you have to understand. Another thing that he mentions here that will help us when it comes to not seeking fame and so on and so forth. Let me just see here. This is an important point that he mentions, which is that our position is to be a slave. Our position is to be a slave. And he mentions this here. وحب الشرف بالحرص على نفوذ الأمر والنهي وتدبير أمر الناس إذا قصد بذلك مجرد عرور منزلة على الخلق والتعاظم عليهم وإظهار صاحب هذا الشرف حاجة الناس وافتقارهم إليه وذلهم في طلب حوائجه منه فهذا نفسه مزاحمة لربوبية الله وألوهيته. He mentions a very important point, which is that if someone wants people to obey him or to obey her and commands them and tries to make them subservient to him, then this person, what he's doing is that he's fighting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rububiyyah. Allah is the one who commands. Allah is the one who legislates. If we are commanding people to do things and bossing people around because we like it, we like that people are subservient to us, then it's as if we're trying to be rivals to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it could lead somebody to shirk. It could lead somebody to shirk. So we have to understand our position. Our position is to be a slave, not for people to obey us, not for people to follow our orders. And if we mix those two together, it might reach the point where we're trying to be rivals to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. I'll end with this one because I know you guys have been sitting for a while, because there was Sheikh Fahd, now there was directly after that me. So I'll end with this one last point that he mentioned. So there's many other points. You see the red markers here, the red marks. But the last one that he mentions is that when it comes to knowledge, we have to understand the reality of knowledge. حقيقة العلم. And he talks about this for a while. I'll see if I can cover it all. But he says that Wahab ibn Munabbih, who was a great salaf, he wrote to Makhul, who was another salaf. أما بعد فإنك أصبحت بظاهر علمك عندنا شرفا عندنا شرفا ومنزلة فاطلب بباطن علمك عند الله منزلة وزلفى واعلم أن إحدى المنزلتين تمنع من الأخرى. Pretty much one brother wrote to another brother telling him, I see that now, because of the knowledge that you're able to show to people, you've gained a position of power in their eyes. You're the sheikh, you're the ustad, and so on and so forth. So he told his brother, but seek with the reality of knowledge to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because one station prevents you from the other. You seeking to be high and to be mighty in the eyes of people prevents you from being high and mighty in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And many times, not all the time, but many times you seeking to be high in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might make you seem weak in the eyes of people. But one station might prevent you from the other. Then Ibn Rajab, he goes into lengths talking about this. I'll translate to the best of my ability. ومعنى هذا أن العلم الظاهر من تعلم الشرائع وأحكام والفتاوى والقصص والوعظ ونحو ذلك مما يظهر للناس ويحصل به لصاحبه عنده منزلة وشرفا. والعلم الباطن المودع في القلوب من معرفة الله وخشيته ومحبته ومراقبته والأنس به وشوقي للقائه والتوكل عليه والرضا بقضائه والإعراض عن غرض الدنيا عن عرض الدنيا الفاني والإقبال على جوهر الآخرة الباقي كل هذا يوجب لصاحبه عند الله منزلة وزلفى. What he's trying to say here is that Ibn Rajab comments on this statement of the man. He says that knowledge as a parent, which is knowledge of, the Sharia and so on and so forth, and you being able to quote things, right? And you being able to say things to people that will make them see you in a specific type of way, you being able to quote a hadith and stuff like that. This will give you a position inside of people. And this is something that Allah might give somebody, ilm al-lisan, knowledge on the tongue, being able to quote things. Allah might give some people this. But true knowledge, which is you knowing Allah, you having a relationship with Allah, you loving Allah, you being aware of Allah, you hoping for Allah, you putting your trust upon Allah, you turning away from this dunya. This true knowledge, this is the knowledge that's going to give you a position inside of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why Ibn Rajab, he mentions in his other book, Fadl al Salaf ala Ibn Khalaf, he mentions ليس العلم من كثرة الرواية على كثرة المقال لكنه نور يقذف في القلب يفهم به العبد الحق ويعبر عن ذلك ويميز به بينه وبين الباطل ويعبر عن ذلك بعبارات وجيزة محسن مقاصد. Ibn Rajab mentions in another book that knowledge is not you being able to quote a lot of things, but rather true knowledge is a light that Allah places in your heart. With this light, you're able to distinguish between truth and falsehood, and you're able to express this light that you have in your heart, which is this true knowledge, in very concise ways. وإحدى المنزلتين تمنع الأخرى فمن وقف مع منزلة عند الخلق واشتغل بما حصل له عنده بالعلم الظاهر من شرف الدنيا كان همه حفظ هذه المنزلة عند الخلق. And the Shaykh, he mentions that the person who stops himself at just learning that knowledge that's going to give them positions, that knowledge that's going to allow them to do reels and amaze people with their talk and all that stuff. Someone stopping at that level will make them busy themselves with keeping their position with the creation. So they're always going to be trying to say things and do things that's going to maintain this position of leadership or this position of knowledge that people seem to have him. So this person will not say, I don't know. This person will always say, I know. This person will make sure he only talks about things that he knows is going to bring people to him. He won't talk about things that might make some people sad. His focus will always be what's going to bring me the most followers. Instagram followers, Facebook followers, YouTube subscribers, and so on and so forth. We continue this here by saying, ومن اشتغل بتربيته منزلته عند الله بما ذكرنا من علم الباطن وصل إلى الله فاشتغل به عما سواه. The Shaykh mentions a person who focuses on that knowledge that's going to bring them closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reach Allah. And someone who's with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be busy with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and will not care about the people. وَكَانَ لَهُ فِي ذَلِكَ شُغْلٌ عَنْ طَالِبِ الْمَنزِلَةِ عَنْدَ الْخَلْقِ. And if you have a position for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why would you care about your position for the people? وَمَعْ هَذَا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ يُعْطِيهِ الْمَنزِلَةَ فِي قُلُوبِ الْخَلْقِ. But even then, if you have a position with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will give you a position with the people. So if you focus on Allah, Allah's going to take care of the people for you. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ سَيَجْعَلُ لَهُمْ رَحْمَةً وَدًّا. Allah says, those who put in do righteous deeds, Allah is going to place in the hearts of people love for them. مَنْ أَقْبَلَ عَلَى اللَّهِ بِقَلْبِهِ أَقْبَلَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ بِقُلُوبِ الْمَخْلُوقِينَ. As some of the Salaf, they said, the person who goes to Allah with his heart, Allah is going to bring the hearts of the people to him. Just focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah is going to take care of the people for you. The person who rectifies his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will suffice him from his creation. One of my teachers, he passed away, Allah arhamu. It was one of the few things I actually took from him before he passed away, but he told me, he told us, it wasn't just me, he told us the person who rectifies their horizontal relationship, Allah will suffice them from their vertical relationships, if I got it right. And the person who, the person who rectifies their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will suffice them from the relationship with people. Anyways, he brings you more hadith and more statements talking about what I just mentioned. So he mentions, فَبِكُلِّ حَالٍ فَطَرَبُ شَرَفِ الْآخِرَةِ يَحْصَلُ مَعَهُ شَرَفُ الدُّنْيَا. He says pretty much the conclusion is that the person who seeks the hereafter and tries to be high in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will make him high in the sight of people. And then he ends with two lines of poetry. المراني مفترقان ليس تراهما يتشاوقان خلط والطلاق طلب المعاد مع الراس والعلا فدعني يفتن لما هو باقي. finishes it, the risala, if you will, by saying that there are two affairs that مفترقان ليس تراهما يتشوقان خلطا للطلاق. There are two things that are different and they're never going to combine together. طلب المعاد, you seek in the hereafter and you seek in this dunya. So leave that which is going to leave you, which is this dunya, and focus on the hereafter. So these were some things, yani, I didn't do justice to the book, but I do highly recommend you guys read the book. Small book, in English it's 40 pages. You can get it on your iPod, on your phone, you don't have to buy it. There's a PDF for it. You can read it before you go to sleep. Within a month you'll have finished it for sure. And inshallah you'll find a lot of benefits in it. أكون قولي هذا فاستغفر لكم ما سمع المسلمين سبحانك وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We'll be starting in around 7 minutes, inshallah. So you guys have a 7-minute break. Barakallah feekum. 4:15 sharp. Barakallah feekum.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف العرب والعجم وعلى آله وأصحابه ذوي المكارم والمفاخر والهمم ومن تبعهم بإحسان على طريق أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So inshallah we'll be continuing with the conference. I hope you all benefited so far from our previous mashayikh, may Allah bless them, for the knowledge they've shared. Inshallah, for this session, it's going to be a little shorter than the previous sessions. I'm not gonna spend too long. And the book that we're going to be reflecting upon and extracting benefits from is known as At-Tibyan fi Adabi Hamlat al-Quran. So this book has been written by Imam al-Nawawi. And it's a long book. It's a big book. And of course, we're not going to be able to go through the entirety of it. So inshallah, as was written on the program, it's selected readings from this kitab. And so parts of the book, different chapters, where inshallah I feel that it's beneficial for us to read and reflect upon, we're going to reflect upon it. And so what does At-Tibyan fi Adabi Hamlat al-Quran mean? So it's Imam Nawawi, the etiquette of the carrier of the Quran, clarifying for us the etiquette that the one who carries the Quran should come forth with. And so anyone who is a student of the Quran, a learner of the Quran, a teacher of the Quran, and basically every Muslim, because anyone who is a Muslim should be connected to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these mannerisms that he explains for us in this book, and haqiqatan, truthfully, he goes into depth. So that's why the book is very long. And Imam Nawawi, after he wrote this book, 6 days after, he wrote a mukhtasar, a summary of this book. And he called it Mukhtasar At-Tibyan fi Adabi Hamlat al-Quran, because he felt that it was important for the students to actually memorize the content in this book. And so we don't have the Mukhtasar. I don't have the Mukhtasar in front of me. I have the original book, but I have the Mukhtasar in English. It's been translated by Sheikh Musa Ferber. So of course, we're not going to be able to finish this book today. We're only going to do selected readings, and hopefully that motivates everyone to go and purchase this book. It's in English. It's called Connecting to the Quran, Imam Nawawi's Abridged Guide to Practical Etiquette with the Quran. So I'll repeat it one more time. Connecting to the Quran, Imam Nawawi's Abridged Guide to Practical Etiquette with the Quran. And I believe it's the only translation of this book. And so it's very beneficial, and Sheikh Musa Ferber, he really clarified and explained the details of Imam Nawawi. The way he speaks sometimes is difficult. And so he clarified it and he made it easy for the English reader. So inshallah, before we start the book, we have to speak about Imam Nawawi and who he was. So Imam Nawawi, Abu Zakariya Yahya ibn Sharaf al-Nawawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he was born in the lands of Nawa. Nawa is his hometown, which was close to Damascus. And that's why he's known as al-Nawawi, nisbatan, right, going back to where he was from, Nawa. And so Imam Nawawi, he was born in the year 631 after the migration. So he was born in the 7th century after the Hijrah. And there were many scholars that came before him, and there were many scholars who came after him. But he became renowned and well known because of the works that he left behind, the piety that he had, and also the sincerity he had, which left the barakah, the blessings in his works. And so he passed away in the year 676 after the Hijrah, which means he only lived for 45 years. He passed away when he was 45 years old. And the scholars, they mention in his tarjama and his biography so many beautiful things about what he used to do, how he used to carry himself. And so he used to enjoin the good and forbid the evil. He was well known for this. He was also well known for his sincerity when it came to knowledge, and also him striving in seeking this knowledge. And it's also mentioned that he never used to eat from the fruits of Damascus because he didn't know exactly who owned these gardens and where it came from. So he had wara'. He used to protect himself from things of doubt. And it's mentioned that in the entirety of the day, he would only eat one meal after Salat al-Isha, only one meal. And before Salat al-Fajr, he would drink water, and he would suffice himself with this. And it's mentioned that for 2 years in a row in his life, close to 2 years, he never slept on his side. He never slept on his side. So what does this mean? It means he would be reviewing and memorizing and learning to the point where he wouldn't sleep, and he would only sleep with his books in his hands. When someone is sleeping like this, and they're drowsy. That was going on for 2 years in a row. This is Imam al-Nawawi. And so they mentioned that he went to Hajj with his father when he was younger, and on his way there, the day that they left, and they had to travel by foot, there's no cars, there's no trains, he became very sick. And this sickness, it continued all the way until the day of Arafah. And his father mentions that despite his sickness, he would never complain. Or he would never complain or mention that he was going through difficulty. He used to be someone who used to be able to take hardship and take harm and continue on his path. And so Imam Nawawi, for 6 years in his life, those who write his tarjama, the scholars, they say 6 years in a row, he was not teaching and he was not authoring, and the only thing that he was focusing on was studying. And he used to have 11 classes a day. And they mention the books, or they mention what he used to actually learn. If you go to the tarjama, it mentions, right, وَكَانَ يَقْرَأُ فِي الْيَوْمِ 12 دَرْسًا. So 12, عَلَى الْمَشَايِخِ شَرْحًا وَتَصْحِيحًا. So they used to explain it to him and also correct his mistakes. So he says, دَرْسَيْنِ فِي الْوَسِيطِ وَدَرْسًا فِي الْمُهَذَّبِ وَدَرْسًا فِي الْجَمْعِ بَيْنَ الصَّحِيحَيْنِ وَدَرْسًا فِي أَسْمَاءِ الرِّجَالِ ودرسا في صحيح مسلم ودرسا في اللمع لابن الجني ودرسا في إصلاح المنطق لابن السكيت ودرسا في التصريف ودرسا في أصول الفقه. All this is happening the same day. So he's taking a class in أصول الفقه, a class in the Sahih Imam Muslim. He's taking a class in منطق. So a class in also balagha, right, etiquette, morphology, different sciences, right? Usul al-Din referring to aqidah, in fiqh as well. All this is in the same day, 11 classes, 12 classes per day. And he says that I was upon this for 6 years in a row. And then after that, he started to author. And his works that he left behind are known to all of us. Who can name some of the books of Imam Nawawi? Riyadh al-Salihin, excellent. Anyone else? Imam Nawawi, a book that he wrote. The most famous one that we all heard about before. The 40 hadith, the collection of 40 hadith. So he also has an explanation on Sahih Muslim. He also has a kitab known as Al-Adhkar, in which he mentions the authentic supplications in the Quran and the Sunnah. He has a book in Taqrib al-Taysir. He has a book in Mustalah al-Hadith, terminologies in Hadith. He has a book in a magnanimous work in comparative fiqh called Majmu' Sharh al-Muhaddab. He has a book called Al-Minhaj in Fiqh al-Shafi'i. He also has a work known as At-Tibyan fi Adab Hamlat al-Quran, which is this work. And so inshallah today, and that was only some of the works I mentioned. He authored many more books than that. But inshallah today we're going to be going through this kitab. And so the book has 9 chapters. The book has 9 chapters. So I'm going to mention the chapters so we can have an overview of the book, because we're not going to cover the entirety of it today. And then inshallah you can go and explore this kitab on your own time, inshallah. So what are these chapters? So its contents are following. The first chapter is the merit of reciting and bearing the Quran, the fadl of reciting the Quran. The second chapter is the precedence of recitation and of its reciters. The reciters of the Quran, the precedence that they take over others. Number 3, honoring the folk of the Quran, the obligation to honor the people of the Quran. And so those 3 chapters are very short. We're going to cover all of them, inshallah. They're very short. We're going to read through them. And the scholars, when they're reading this kitab, usually someone recites and they just make small commentary on the different ahadith and the different statements Imam Nawawi mentions. Then chapter 4, 5, and 6 are the longest chapters in the book. And he says, he says, this is the maqsood, or the main reason why this book was written. Specifically chapter number 6. Chapter number 6. And it has a lot of ahkam pertaining to recitation of the Quran, when not to recite, where to recite, details pertaining to the ayat in the Quran, a lot of different things pertaining to ahkam, and not so much of mannerisms and tazkiyah, purification of the soul. So for that chapter, we're not going to reach it today. That's chapter number 6, is the etiquette of recitation. The etiquette of recitation. Chapter 4 and 5 is the etiquette of his teachers and his students. This is a very important chapter. And then chapter 5 is the etiquette of the one who has carrying the Quran in their heart. The hafiz al-Quran, how they have to carry themselves. Then chapter 7 is the etiquette of all people with the Quran. chapter number 8 is verses and chapters recommended at particular times. We're not going to cover this chapter as well. And the last chapter is writing the Quran and respecting its written form. Tamam. So those are 9 chapters that he brings in this kitab. So what is the reason that Imam Nawawi wrote the book? His muqaddimah is very long. We're only going to take a very short excerpt from it. So he says, why did he write this kitab? Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, he says, وَرَأَيْتُ أَهْلَ بَلَدِنَا دِمِشْقَ حَمَاهَا اللَّهُ تَعَالَى وَصَانَهَا وَسَائِرَ بِلَادِ الْإِسْلَامِ مُكْثِرِينَ مِنَ الْاعْتِنَاءِ بِتِلَاوَةِ الْقُرْآنِ الْعَزِيزِ تَعَلُّمًا وَتَعْلِيمًا وَعَرْضًا وَدِرَاسَةً فِي جَمَاعَاتٍ وَفُرَادًا مجتهدين في ذلك بالليالي والأيام زادهم الله تعالى حرصا عليه وعلى جميع أنواع الطاعات مريدين وجه ذي الجلال والإكرام فدعاني ذلك إلى جمع مختصر في آداب حملته. He says that the people in his locality, Dimishq, and I forgot to mention in his biography that he left Nawa and he went to Dimishq, he went to Damascus when he was 19 years old. And that's where he sought knowledge, and he then later became the Ra'is, the head of the madrasa that he was a part of in Dimishq. So he stayed in Damascus. And so he said, I saw the people in Damascus that they would put lots of emphasis and importance on the Quran, meaning they would recite it often and they would teach it often, and they would always be with the Quran. So he said, because of that, he said, فَدَعَانِي ذَلِكَ إِلَى جَمْعِ مُخْتَصَرٍ فِي آدَابِ حَمْلَتِهِ. I wanted to compile, or this led me to compile a mukhtasar, a small book that compiles all of the etiquettes that they need. The people in his city, they were always reading the Quran, always with the Quran, and he saw some mistakes that they were doing in their etiquette and also in their dealings as it pertains to the book of Allah. And so he decided to write this mukhtasar. So we go to the first bab, al-bab al-awwal, and we said it's with regard to the merit and the virtue of the person who recites the Quran and memorizes the Quran. And he starts with the ayah in the Quran. He says, باب الأول في أطراف من فضيلة تلاوة القرآن وحملته قال الله عز وجل إن الذين يتلون كتاب الله وأقاموا الصلاة وأنفقوا مما رزقناهم سرا وعلانية يرجون تجارة لن تبور ليوفيهم أجورهم ويزيدهم من فضله إنه غفور شكور. He starts with a verse from the Quran. And the scholars, they say that this ayah is known as the ayah of the Qurra, the verse in the Quran that is for the reciters of the Quran, the Qurra, because of what it mentions of virtue that they will receive. He says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَتْلُونَ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ, those who recite the Quran, وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ, and they establish the prayer, وَأَنفَقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُم, and they give in charity that which Allah has blessed them with, سِرًّا وَعَلَانِيَةً, in public and also privately. They worship Allah in public and private. And we're going to get to that, inshallah, when we speak about niyyah. يَرْجُونَ تِجَارَةً لَن تَبُورَ. They hope for a reward that's never going to perish. And so, the scholars, they say this verse is the ayatul Qurra, the verse for the Qurra in the Quran. And then he continues and he says, وَرُوِينَا عَنْ عُثْمَانِ بْنِ عَفَّانٍ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. He brings the hadith, the famous hadith of Uthman bin Affan, in which he says, the best of you are those who learn the Quran and teach it to others. When the Prophet ﷺ was saying this hadith, who was he speaking to? He was speaking to the companions, who were all virtuous, and they were all people of fadl. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says regarding them in the Quran, لَقَدْ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِذْ يُبَايِعُونَكَ تَحْتَ الشَّجَرَةِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was pleased with the believers, referring to the companions when they gave the pledge of allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ under the tree in the story of Hudaybiyah. And so Allah is pleased with all of them, but at the same time the Prophet ﷺ is telling them the best amongst you is the one who learns the Quran and teaches it to others. And so that's a point to reflect upon. And also khayriyah here, being better than something or better than another person, is not referring to the person specifically. Because we know the best of this ummah after the Prophet ﷺ is Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, then Umar bin al-Khattab. But it's referring to the jins, meaning the group, or the group of people that this hadith is referring to, Ahlul Quran. خَيْرُكُم مَّن تَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ وَعَلَّمَهُ. Then he says, he brings the takhrij, we skipped that. then he says, وعن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الذي يقرأ القرآن وهو ماهر به مع السفرة الكرام البررة والذي يقرأ القرآن ويتتعتع فيه وهو عليه شاق له أجران. So this hadith of Aisha رضي الله عنها, in which the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام says, the one who recites the Quran وهو ماهر, and they're proficient and excellent in reciting the Quran, who are they going to be with? وهو ماهر به مع السفرة الكرام البررة. They're with or at the same level as the malaika. سفرة الكرام البررة is referring to the angels, the honorable scribes, the obedient scribes, the angels. So if you're someone who's proficient in the Quran, excellent in reciting it, and you're sincere upon that, then your daraja is the same as, your level is the same as the angels. The angels who are the scribes, the honorable scribes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالَّذِي يَقْرَأُ الْقُرْآنَ وَيَتَتَعْتَعُ فِيهِ, and the one who is struggling in reciting the Quran. And they're doing their best, but they don't stop. They don't stop, they don't quit. They continue to recite, and they continue to practice. The Prophet ﷺ says, وَهُوَ عَلَيْهِ شَاقٌ لَهُ أَجْران. This person has double the reward. This person has double the reward. So that's an encouragement for the one who is struggling to recite the Quran and memorize it, to continue, and to not to stop. Then he brings the takhrij. Then he brings another long hadith. We're going to skip that hadith. And he says, وعن عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن الله تعالى يرفع بهذا الكتاب أقواما ويضع به آخرين. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the Quran, He elevates people, and through the Quran, others are also debased. And the reason that Umar bin Khattab, he said this hadith, there's a story behind it. During his khilafah, when he was alive, Umar bin Khattab, the governor of Mecca, his name was Nafi' ibn Abdul Harith. And so he went to go meet Umar bin Khattab at the outskirts of Mecca for a particular reason. And so when he's leaving, he has to leave someone in charge, correct? So he left one of the companions in charge. His name was Abdurrahman ibn Abza. And so when Nafi' ibn Abdul Harith, the governor, came to Umar bin Khattab, the question that Umar bin Khattab asked him was, who did you leave in charge of? Which city? Mecca. And so he said, Abdurrahman ibn Abza. And Umar bin Khattab, he didn't know who this was, because Abdurrahman ibn Abza was one of the freed slaves of Mecca, and his lineage was not known to Umar bin Khattab. And so Umar bin Khattab was confused. He said, who is this? We don't know him, right? And so Nafi' ibn Abdul Harith, he said, he is a faqih, he's a jurist, someone who has become an expert in halal and haram. وَقَارِئٌ لِكِتَابِ اللَّهِ, and he is a proficient reciter of the Quran. Then when Nafi' bin Abdul Harith told Umar bin Khattab this, he said, سَمِعْتُ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ يَقُولُ, I heard the Prophet ﷺ say, this is sabab al-tahdith, right? Why is he narrating this hadith now? Because of this incident. And then he says this hadith, إِنَّ اللَّهَ تَعَالَى إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَرْفَعُ بِهَذَا الْكِتَابِ أَقْوَامًا وَيَضَعُ بِهِ آخَرِينَ. That Allah, through this kitab, elevates people, and through it others are debased. So he was a free slave, but now he is in charge of Mecca. Mecca is where the Haram is, the greatest city in the world. And from being a free slave to the one who is in charge of Mecca. Then he brings another hadith. وعن أبي أمامة الباهلي رضي الله عنه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول اقرأوا القرآن فإنه يأتي يوم القيامة شفيعا لأصحابه رواه مسلم. In this hadith, in the Prophet ﷺ, he says, recite the Quran, for indeed it'll come on the day of resurrection as an intercessor for you. When everyone leaves you and there's no one going to come to help you, who's going to come and help you? The Quran. The Quran is going to come and intercede on your behalf. And so if you stick with the Quran and the kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you don't leave it on a day when you need it the most, it's going to come and help you. It's going to come and intercede for you. So hold on to it in this life, and in the next life it'll come and it'll help you. Then he brings another hadith. طيب, we'll skip this one. طيب. وعن عبد الله بن عمرو بن العاص رضي الله عنهما عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال يقال لصاحب القرآن اقرأ وارتقي ورتل كما كنت ترتل في الدنيا فإن منزلتك عند آخر آية تقرأ. This hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he says that the person, the Sahib al-Quran, the person who was from Ahl al-Quran, on the day of resurrection, right, when they enter Jannah, they're going to be told to recite, Iqra, وَرَتِّلْ. They're going to be told to recite, and based on their recitation, they're going to elevate in rank until the last verse that they recite. So the more Quran you know, and the more you memorize, and the more you act upon it, the higher your daraja is going to be in Jannah. Al-Kattani, one of the scholars, rahimullah, he has an opinion in which he says that the darajat that a person can reach is the amount of verses in the Quran. This is what he says. And so if a person knows the entire Quran, and we'll speak about the difference between memorizing and acting upon it. So when we say it's Sahib al-Quran, a person who's from Ahl al-Quran, it's not just one who memorized it, but one who used to act upon the Quran. Who used to act upon the Quran. Then he brings the hadith of Mu'adh ibn Anas, in which the Prophet ﷺ said that the person who memorized the Quran, their parents are going to be wearing a crown on the day of resurrection. That's the first bab. The first bab was the virtue of the people of the Quran. So when you hear these ahadith, it motivates you to be from amongst these people. They even asked Sufyan al-Thawri. وعن عبد الحميد الحماني قال سألت سفيان الثوري. They asked Sufyan al-Thawri. عن الرجل يغزو أحب إليك أو يقرأ القرآن. What is more beloved to you? A person who strives in battle, in jihad for the cause of Allah, or one who recites the Quran? And he said, the one who recites the Quran, because of the hadith, خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. That's the first bab. That's the first chapter is done in the book. And how many chapters do we have left? 8 more chapters. So this chapter now, Al-Bab al-Thani, he's going to be speaking about the preference that's given to the reciter of the Quran and the person who carries the Quran. ثبت عن أبي مسعود الأنصاري البدري رضي الله عنه عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال يؤم القوم أقرأهم لكتاب الله رواه مسلم. This hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that the one that should lead the people in prayer is the one who knows the most Quran. And so again, the purpose of him bringing this chapter is to show the preference that's given to the one who recites the Quran and who is proficient in the Quran and memorizes it. Then he says, وعن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال كان القراء أصحاب مجلس عمر رضي الله عنه ومشاورته كهولا كانوا أو شبانا. Umar ibn Khattab, from his way was that he would have a council of companions that he would speak to pertaining to important matters. Whether it was political matters pertaining to the religion, anything that he wanted to take an action upon, he would have a mushawara. He had people that he would consult. And in this hadith, Abdullah ibn Abbas says that the people who were filling this majlis, most of them were the qurra. The people who used to recite the Quran were proficient in the Quran. Kahulan kanu aw shubbanan. Whether they were young or whether they were old. And inshallah, we're going to get to more details pertaining to that. Then he says, وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْمَذْهَبَ الْمُخْتَارَ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِ مَنْ يُعْتَمَدُ عَلَيْهِ مِنَ الْعُلَمَاءِ أَنَّ قِرَاءَة الْقُرْآنِ أَفْضَلُ مِنَ التَّسْبِيحِ وَالتَّهْلِيلِ وَغَيْرِهِمَا مِنَ الْأَذْكَارِ وَقَدْ تَظَاهَرَتِ الْأَدِلَّةُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ. And Nawawi, he says that reciting the Quran is better than التسبيح والتهليل, saying subhanallah and saying la ilaha illallah. These are adhkar, they have tremendous rewards. And in his book known as Al-Adhkar, which he wrote himself, he speaks about the virtues of these different supplications. But he says that what is the correct opinion, according to majority of the scholars, is that reciting the Quran is better than dhikr. So it's the greatest dhikr. The greatest dhikr is the Quran. طيب. Then he goes to the 3rd chapter. So the first 2 chapters are done. Then he says, قال الله عز وجل. This chapter is talking about honoring the people of the Quran, honoring the people of the Quran and not harming them. He says, الباب الثالث في إكرام أهل القرآن والنهي عن إيذائهم. قال الله عز وجل ومن يعظم شعائر الله فإنها من تقوى القلوب. وقال تعالى ومن يعظم حرمات الله فهو خير له عند ربه. وقال تعالى واخفض جناحك للمؤمنين. وقال تعالى والذين يؤذون المؤمنين والمؤمنات بغير ما اكتسبوا فقد احتملوا بهتانا وإثما عظيما. Those who harm, this ayah says, those who harm the believing men and women, بغير ما اكتسبوا, for something that they didn't do, they slander them, فَقَدْ احْتَمَلُوا بُهْتَانًا وَإِثْمًا عَظِيمًا. They're going to carry a great sin upon their shoulders. They're going to carry a great burden upon themselves. And so here it says مُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ, believing men and believing women. And so from musamma al-iman, the first people that are included into those who are believers are the people of the Quran, Ahlul Quran. So beware and protect yourself from harming the people of Quran. If you see someone who they recite the Quran often, and majority of their time they're reading the Quran or teaching it or memorizing it, don't harm this person. Because if you harm this person, that harm will come back to you in this life and in the next. And that person could potentially be from the awliya of Allah, the close, beloved people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then he says, وعن أبي موسى الأشعري رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن من إجلال الله تعالى إكرام ذي الشيبة المسلم وحامل القرآن غير الغالي فيه والجافي عنه وإكرام ذي السلطان المقسط رواه أبو داود وهو حديث حسن. He says, from exalting Allah, from exalting and glorifying Allah is that you honor three people. Three people. And he mentions them. The first one is the old person, the old Muslim. The second one is وَحَامِلِ الْقُرْآنِ, the one who is carrying the Quran, the one who is the hafiz of the Quran. غَيْرَ الْغَالِي فِيهِ وَالْجَافِ عَنْهُ. They don't surpass the boundaries of the Quran and they don't transgress, but they recite the Quran the way they're supposed to recite it and they act upon it the way they're supposed to act upon it. If you honor this person, then you have exalted Allah. If you honor this person, you have exalted Allah. Then he says, وَإِكْرَامِ the Sultan al-Muqsid, and also the just ruler. If you honor the just ruler, you've also honored Allah. Then Aisha radiallahu anha, she says, وعن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت أمرنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أن ننزل الناس منازلهم. She says that the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام commanded us that we put people in their respective positions or levels. So if you know this person is from Ahlul Quran, then you put them in their respective level and you give them the honor that Allah has given them. Then, subhanAllah, the next hadith is very powerful. It's from Jabir ibn Abdullah. وعن جابر بن عبد الله رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يجمع بين الرجلين من قتلى أحد. After the battle of Uhud, they were burying the Muslims. And the Prophet ﷺ was also helping bury the Muslims. And there were two men who passed away, and they were brought together to be buried. يجمع بين الرجلين من قتلى أحد. ثم يقول, the Prophet ﷺ asked, which of them, أيهما أكثر أخذا للقرآن? Which one of them memorized more Quran, or was more closer to, meaning practiced the Quran more and memorized it more? فإذا أشير إلى أحدهما, then they pointed towards which one of them it was. قدمه في اللحد. The Prophet ﷺ, he brought him forth first to be buried. So the person who is from the people of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honors them when they're alive, when they die, before they're buried, and also in the akhirah. وَلَلْآخِرَةُ أَكْبَرُ دَرَجَاتٍ وَأَكْبَرُ تَفْضِيلًا. So this hadith shows us that even when two people are brought together to be buried, the Prophet ﷺ asked which one of them memorized the Quran more and was closer to the Quran, and that person was buried first. Then he brings the hadith of Abu Hurairah وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أن الله عز وجل قال من آذى لي وليا فقد آذنته بالحرب. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, this hadith Qudsi, whoever harms one of my close, beloved slaves, فَقَدْ آذَنْتُهُ بِالْحَرْبِ. That person Allah has declared war against them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has declared war against them. And the closest people to Allah are the people of the Quran. Then he says, وعن الإمامين الجليلين أبي حنيفة والشافعي رحمه الله تعالى قال, Al-Shafi'i and Abu Hanifa, they both said, إِن لَمْ يَكُنِ الْعُلَمَاءُ أَوْلِيَاءَ اللَّهِ فَلَيْسَ لِلَّهِ وَلِيٌّ. If the scholars, and when we say scholars, the first person that comes into this category is the scholar of the Quran. Why does a person learn Nahu? Why does a person learn Mustalah al-Hadith and Usul al-Fiqh and all of these ulum al-ala? It's for them to understand the Quran. At the end of the day, the goal is to understand the Quran. Ilm al-Ghaya is the Quran. Is the Quran and the Sunnah. So Al-Shafi'i and Abu Hanifa, they say that if the scholars are not from the close beloved people of Allah, فَلَيْسَ لِلَّهِ وَلِيٌّ, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no close beloved people to him. If it's not the scholars, then who is it? And Allah, he says in the Quran, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءُ. The people who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the most are the scholars. And so he finishes this chapter. Then he goes into the chapter of الباب الرابع في آداب معلم القرآن ومتعلمه. The etiquette and the mannerisms that the teacher of the Quran and the student of the Quran have to come forth with. So this chapter is very important. And he says, هذا الباب من البابين بعده أو مع البابين بعده هي مقصود الكتاب. This chapter and the two chapters to follow are the maqsood, the reason why he authored this book. So you can see those first 3 chapters as kind of an introduction. It's kind of part of the introduction. طيب. Let me just check the time. Okay, it's almost Asr time. So, and the class ends at Asr. So inshallah, I'm going to select specific chapters and specific mannerisms, and inshallah, hopefully we can take that home with us today. I'm going to skip over the etiquette of the teacher. All of us here, most of us, inshallah, we're all students. So we go directly to the etiquette of the student. And so he says, جَمِيعُ مَا ذَكَرْنَاهُ مِنْ آدَابِ الْمُعَلِّمِ فِي نَفْسِهِ آدَابٌ لِلْمُتَعَلِّمِ. So he just finished speaking about the chapter of the etiquette of the teacher, and he says that everything that's going to come for now the etiquette of the student, include in it also the etiquette of the teacher that I just spoke about. So the etiquette of the teacher, the student also has to come forth with those similar etiquettes. I skipped over it, but inshallah he's going to mention some of it again. وَمِنْ آدَابِهِ, and from his etiquettes, أَنْ يَجْتَنِبَ الْأَسْبَابَ الشَّاغِلَةِ عَنِ التَّحْصِيلِ, that the student of the Qur'an, they stay away from anything that preoccupies them and pushes them away from memorizing the Qur'an. That's the first thing, right? إِلَّا سَبَبًا لَا بُدَّ مِنْهُ لِلْحَاجَةِ, except if there is something specific that they actually need to do, then they can go and do this because they need to fulfill this. Aside from that, they have to preoccupy themselves with learning the Qur'an and memorizing it and teaching it and benefiting from it. وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ يُطَهِّرَ قَلْبَهُ مِنَ الْأَدْنَاسِ, the student of the Qur'an has to purify their heart from all types of filth. لِيَصْلَحَ لِقَبُولِ الْقُرْآنِ وَحِفْظِهِ وَاسْتِثْمَارِهِ, in order for their heart to accept the Qur'an and for the Qur'an to grow within their hearts. And for them to be able to memorize the Qur'an, they have to purify their heart. فَقَدْ صَحَّ عَنْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ أَنَّهُ قَالَ, it's been authentically attributed to the Prophet ﷺ that he said, أَلَا إِنَّ فِي الْجَسَدِ مُضْغَةً, in the heart there is a piece of flesh. إِذَا صَلَحَتْ, if it's rectified, صَلَحَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ, then the entire body becomes rectified. وَإِذَا فَسَدَتْ, but if it becomes tarnished, فَسَدَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ, the entire body becomes tarnished. Everything to do with this person becomes tarnished. If their heart is tarnished, everything else is also tarnished. وَقَدْ أَحْسَنَ الْقَائِلُ, and he says how beautiful, how well said was the statement of the one who said, يُطَيَّبُ الْقَلْبُ لِلْعِلْمِ كَمَا تُطَيَّبُ الْأَرْضُ لِلزِّرَاعَةِ. The same way, right now if you buy land and you want to grow produce, what's the first thing you're going to do to this land? You're going to prepare it for it to be able to grow this produce. You're going to remove everything that needs to be removed. You're going to fix the land. You're going to perfect it and get it ready for when the rain comes down and the sun shines so that the produce can grow. And he says, and that's the similitude and the parallel of the heart as it relates to the Qur'an. If you don't purify your heart from all types of diseases, then the Qur'an won't be able to settle and rest within. وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ يَتَوَاضَعَ لِمُعَلِّمِهِ, the student of the Qur'an has to be humble in front of their teacher. وَيَتَأَدَّبَ مَعَهُ وَإِنْ كَانَ أَصْغَرَ مِنْهُ سِنًّا, and they have to act in accordance to proper mannerisms, even if the teacher of Qur'an is younger than them. And they mention, the scholars, when they're explaining this part of the kitab, the story of Abdurrahman ibn Auf, that he used to go to the tents of Mina during the pilgrimage and take the Qur'an from Abdullah ibn Abbas. Abdullah ibn Abbas, after the passing of the Prophet ﷺ, he was 13 or 14 years old. And Abdurrahman ibn Auf, who was from the 10 promised Jannah, and was much older than him, he would go to him and take the Qur'an from him. Because Abdullah ibn Abbas, the Prophet ﷺ, made dua for him. And he said, Allahumma faqihhu fi din wa alimhu ta'wil. He said, oh Allah, grant him understanding of the religion and also the ability to interpret. So he became known as Habrul Ummah, the scholar of the Ummah, wa turjumanul Qur'an, and the one who would interpret the Qur'an. And from him, Mujahid took the Qur'an from him. And if Ibn Abbas says something in the tafsir, then his statement is the rajih. It's the relied upon opinion. If Abdullah ibn Abbas says anything pertaining to the Qur'an. And so Abdurrahman ibn Auf used to go to him to his tent and take the Qur'an from him. And so this shows us that it doesn't matter about the age, but what matters is how the person conducts themselves when they're learning and when they're teaching, and that this Quran can be given as a gift to the old person and also to the young person. So just because you're young, don't feel like that you cannot become a scholar of the Quran. And subhanAllah, Umar ibn Khattab, one time in his gathering, he asked his gathering the reason why Surah Al-Nasr was revealed. إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ. And so most of the companions there, they said, because the victory has come, the conquest of Mecca. إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. The people were entering the religion in large folds of numbers after the conquest. And so Umar ibn Khattab, he told them that their interpretation was not the most correct interpretation. And he brought Abdullah ibn Abbas to the gathering. How old is he? He was a teenager, very young. And he asked him the same question. And he said that this surah is an indication that the Prophet ﷺ was going to pass away soon. بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح الأمة. That he conveyed the message and he was sincere to his ummah in advising them. وجاهد في الله تعالى حق الجهاد. And so because that he fulfilled his message and the conquest of Mecca happened and the Arabian Peninsula was now, for the most part, under the rule of Islam, that meant that his passing was coming soon. And so who was the one who was able to interpret this? Abdullah ibn Abbas, and he was very young. طيب. ويتواضع للعلم فبتواضعه للعلم يدركه. If a person is humble when it comes to seeking knowledge, they're going to reach their goal. They're going to reach their goal. Then he says, في أهلية المعلم واحترام الطالب له. Now, respecting the teacher, a whole chapter about it. ولا يتعلم إلا ممن كملت أهليته. The student of knowledge, the student of the Quran, should not take the Quran from anyone except that this person is competent to teach the Quran. So don't just take the Quran from anyone unless you know for sure that this person is able to teach you the Quran. This is from the etiquette of the student, that they have to know. وظهرت ديانته. And that this teacher, their religiosity is known, right? وتحققت معرفته واشتهرت صيانته. طيب فقد قال محمد بن سيرين ومالك بن أنس وغيرهما. Muhammad bin Sirin and Malik bin Anas, they say, هذا العلم دين. This knowledge is your religion. فانظر عمن تأخذون دينكم. So watch closely and carefully who you take your knowledge from. طيب وعليه أن ينظر معلمه بعين الاحترام. That you look towards your teacher with an eye of respect. ويعتقد كمال أهليته ورجحانه. And that you believe with full certainty that they are competent. If you come to learn from this person, it's only because you believe that they are fully competent. If you don't believe they're fully competent, why did you come in the first place? And subhanAllah, they mentioned a story regarding this, in which one of the students of the Quran, he would take Quran from his teacher, and at the same time, he would mention that his teacher made a mistake here, or they weren't competent with regards to this, and at the same time, he's going and taking from him. And subhanAllah, later on, because of all of this, what he said, people, they used to start now to mention things about his isna, his sanad. Because he was making fun of his teacher and mentioning things that he was not supposed to, at the same time taking from him. And so the uquba, the punishment, came back to him. That they said, your sanad and your chain and where you took knowledge from, this spread between the people, that he took knowledge from places that maybe were not the best option. And because of what he used to say. طيب فإنه أقرب إلى انتفاعه به وكان بعض المتقدمين إذا ذهب إلى معلمه تصدق بشيء. Some of the students of knowledge, when they used to go to their teachers, before they used to go to the teacher, they used to give sadaqah. They used to give sadaqah and make a dua and hope that Allah accepts their dua. They used to say, Allahumma astur ayba muallimi anni. Oh Allah, hide from me the faults of my teacher. Because everyone has faults, but they wanted to always look towards their teacher with respect. So they would ask Allah to hide the faults of their teacher. وَلَا تُذْهِبْ بَرَكَةَ عِلْمِهِ مِنِّي. And don't remove the blessings of his knowledge from me. Allow this barakah to reach me. And this barakah will only reach you if you treat your teacher correctly. وَقَالَ الرَّبِيعُ. This is a very beautiful statement. Al-Rabi' was one of the students of Al-Shafi'i. Look what he says. وقال الربيع صاحب الشافعي رحمه الله تعالى ما اجترأت أن أشرب الماء والشافعي ينظر إلي هيبة له. He said that when Ash-Shafi'i used to teach me, I would not even dare to drink water in front of him, هيبة له, out of reverence for him. So if the person doesn't respect their teacher the way the scholars of the past used to respect their teachers, then the knowledge is not going to reach them. وروينا عن أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب رضي الله عنه قال, Ali ibn Abi Talib, he mentions a beautiful statement regarding bringing together a lot of the characteristics and mannerisms that the student of the Quran should come forth with. Inshallah, I think we have some time, so we'll go through this. So he says, من حق العالم عليك, from the rights of your teacher upon you, أن تسلم على الناس عامة وتخصه دونهم بالتحية, that when you come into the gathering, you give everyone salams, right, from afar. But you just sit down? No, you go to your teacher and you give him a specific salam. And we see this often from the students of knowledge. They come to the majlis and they give salams if they're late and they just sit down. You have to go to your teacher and give him salams. Jazakallah khair. You have to give the teacher salams specifically. This is from his rights upon you. Then he says, وَأَن تَجْلِسَ أَمَامَهُ, that you sit in front of him. Sometimes you see the student sitting on the left, far back, right, to the point where he's almost behind the teacher. So you sit in front of him. وَلَا تُشِيرَنَّ عِنْدَهُ بِيَدِكَ. If you want to tell him something, you don't do it with your hand. Sometimes the person is speaking, and let's say they want to say, for example, pass me that paper. So they'll go like this. So you're not supposed to do this to your teacher, right? وَلَا تُشِيرَنَّ عِنْدَهُ بِيَدِكَ وَلَا تَغْمِزَنَّ بِعَيْنِكَ. And you're not supposed to, sometimes when we're speaking to each other, we make subliminal messages with our eyes, right? So a person can do, they can speak through their hand language, symbols that they use with their hands, and also their eyes, right? Even nodding and turning your head certain ways, people understand each other. You're not supposed to do this with your teacher. وَلَا تَقُولَنَّ قَالَ فُلَانًا خِلَافًا لِقَوْلِهِ. And don't come to your teacher and say that I learned this mas'ala and it's opposition to what you taught us yesterday. خِلَافًا لِقَوْلِكَ. And we see this often from the students. Let's say he explains to them a verse in the Quran, then they go on YouTube, right? And they watch 3-4 videos, and they learn something else, and they come to the teacher and they say, in this video, this sheikh said this, and this sheikh said this, khilafan liqawlik, in opposition to what you told me yesterday. This is not from the etiquette of the student. وَلَا تَغْتَابَنَّ عِنْدَهُ أَحَدًا. And don't slander your teacher or backbite ever. وَلَا تُسَارِرْ فِي مَجْلِسِهِ. Sometimes you see students in the gathering, even if the teacher is not speaking, and let's say everyone is revising on their own, they begin to speak within themselves, right? Secretive talk. And so sometimes the teacher can look at, he can see you, and he can't hear you. And so for this to happen in his majlis is not from the etiquette of the student of knowledge and from the etiquette of the student of the Quran. وَلَا تَأْخُذْ بِثَوْبِهِ. Let's say he's walking out, and you want to catch up to him and ask him a question. Don't grab his khamis, his thobe. Say, come, I want to ask you, right? If you want, walk faster, say Assalamu alaikum, and then you can speak to him, right, if he has time. وَلَا تُلِحَّ عَلَيْهِ إِذَا كَسِلْ. If you see that the teacher became tired or drowsy or a little bit, maybe a long class, right, they became a little bit lazy towards the end, don't continuously now ask questions and make him feel or make her feel uncomfortable, right? The person is tired, it's a long day. وَلَا تُعْرِضْ أَيْ لَا تَشْبَعْ مِنْ طُولِ صُحْبَتِهِ. And don't become tired from doing mulazama, being with your teacher for a long period of time. And we see this often. A student will sit with one teacher 6 months. The next 6 months, they're with a different teacher. The 6 months after that, they're with a different teacher. The following 2 years, 3 years, they've sat with 6, 7, 8, 9 teachers. And they did not accumulate anything. Why? Because they didn't do mulazama. They didn't stick to one teacher for a long time. Ash-Shafi'i says, أَخِي لَن تَنَالُوا الْعِلْمَ إِلَّا بِسِتَّةٍ. He says, you will never gain knowledge except through 6 things. سَأُنْبِيكَ عَنْ تَفْصِيلِهَا بِبَيَانِي. I will tell you of these 6 things in depth, in detail. ذَكَاءٌ. You have to have some type of intellect. وَحِرْصٌ. High himma, motivation. وَاجْتِهَادٌ. You have to strive and work hard. وَحِرْصٌ وَاجْتِهَادٌ. وَبُلْغَةٌ. You have to have some type of wealth with you as well. You can't be completely without any wealth. The student of knowledge, They have to have some type of wealth that they can suffice themselves with so they don't have to ask others. Then he says, وَصُحْبَةُ أُسْتَاذٍ وَطُولُ زَمَانٍ. You have to do mulazama of a teacher for a long time. Mulazama meaning you stick with them and you learn from them. وَطُولُ زَمَانٍ. And you have to be on this path for a long period of time. It's not 6 months, 4 months, 1 year, 2 years that a person accumulates ilm. طيب. So that's the statement of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Then he says, فَصْلٌ فِي آدَابِ دُخُولِ إِلَى الْمَجْلِسِ الْعِلْمِ وَيَدْخُلُ عَلَى الشَّيْخِ كَامِلَ الْخِصَالِ. When you enter upon the gathering, you have to be upon the best outwardly state. So the person has to look clean. They have to, also, he's going to mention that you have to use the siwak, right? You have to use the Islamic toothbrush. We call it Islamic toothbrush, the siwak, right? And also, he says, when they come to the majlis, وَأَلَّا يَدْخُلَ بِغَيْرِ اسْتِئْذَانٍ إِذَا كَانَ الشَّيْخُ فِي مَكَانٍ يُحْتَاجُ فِيهِ إِلَى الْإِسْتِئْذَانِ. That you have to ask for permission to enter upon the majlis. You don't just come and enter. This reminds me of a story. One time when I was in Egypt, we went to one of our teachers. He didn't live too far from me. And so I came early. Some of my other colleagues, classmates, we came early. We sat down. And the door was open. The door was open. And the sheikh was teaching. He was teaching. And one of the students came late. And he opened the door and he walked in. This is his house. This is the sheikh's house. He walked in and he sat down in the majlis. And the sheikh, he told him to stand and to exit. So he didn't allow him to sit that day and to benefit from that class. Why? Because he didn't ask permission to come in. And from the right of the teacher is that the student asks for permission to come into the majlis. طيب. Then he says, وَأَنْ يُسَلِّمَ عَلَى الْحَاضِرِينَ إِذَا دَخَلَ وَيَخُصَّهُ. We already spoke about that. طيب. وَلَا يَتَخَطَّى رِقَابَ النَّاسِ. When you come into the gathering and there's people sitting, don't walk over them in order for you to come closer to the teacher. This is not from the etiquette of the student of the Quran. It's not from the etiquette of the student of the Quran. Unless there's a particular reason for you doing so. Let's say that the student that came in and they're late, they're the reciter, the qari of the sheikh. And they came late. And the sheikh, he wants them to come forward for them to read for him. So then they can come over and pass through the people. Aside from that, then they shouldn't do so. Also, they shouldn't separate and sit in between two people who are sitting close together. There's two people who are sitting close together. You want to sit next to this one because he's your friend, or the one on the left side, so you sit right in between them. This is also not from the etiquette of the student. وَلَا يُقِيمَ أَحَدًا عَنْ مَوْضِعِهِ. Let's say you leave and someone takes your spot. You come late. Sorry, you don't come late. You came, you left to go do something, and someone took your spot. When you come back, you don't ask them to get up and say, this is my spot. وَلَا يُقِيمَ أَحَدًا عَنْ مَوْضِعِهِ. طيب. Then he says, وَلَا يَجْلِسْ بَيْنَ الصَّاحِبَيْنِ. Okay, we already spoke about that. Then he goes into a different chapter now, where he's speaking about the student of knowledge as it pertains to his classmates. The student of the Quran as it pertains to his classmates. So he says, وَيَنْبَغِي أَيْضًا أَنْ يَتَأَدَّبَ مَعَ رُفْقَتِهِ وَحَاضِرِ مَجْلِسِ الشَّيْخِ فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ تَأَدُّبًا مَعَ الشَّيْخِ وَسِيَانَةٌ لِمَجْلِسِهِ. So you have to act with good mannerisms also with your classmates, because in extension, then you're respecting your teacher. Why? Because they're part of the gathering of the sheikh. And so if you don't have good manners and respect your classmates, then in return what you're doing is you're disrespecting the teacher. And that's something that's not allowed. Then he says, وَيَقْعَدَ بَيْنَ يَدِ الشَّيْخِ قِعْدَةَ الْمُتَعَلِّمِينَ. That when you sit down, you sit in front of the teacher, the sitting of a student, not the sitting of someone who has learned. So what does this mean? They say Abu Hanifa, when he came to Imam Malik to take from Imam Malik. And keep in mind, Abu Hanifa is older than Imam Malik. The riwayat al-akabir an al-asagir, right? When the one who's older is taking from the one who is younger. And so the people, some of the other students, they used to say that we would see Abu Hanifa sitting in front of Imam Malik as if he is a beginner student who is sitting in a library. And what they meant is, is that the beginner student, the one who's very young, oftentimes when they're reading by themselves, they would sit, you know how we sit for the tashahhud? Like that, right? They would sit like that and read, go through books. And so they're young and they're seeking knowledge, and so they're sitting like that. So they would say that Abu Hanifa, when he comes to Imam Malik, he would sit like that in front of him. And he's older than Imam Malik, and he would take from him, right? Then he says, وَلَا يَرْفَعْ صَوْتَهُ رَفْعًا بَالِغًا مِنْ غَيْرِ حَاجَةٍ. You shouldn't raise your voice beyond what is necessary without a particular need. وَلَا يَضْحَكْ. And you shouldn't laugh in the majlis either, in front of your teacher. وَلَا يُكْثِرَ الْكَلَامَ مِنْ غَيْرِ حَاجَةٍ. And you shouldn't speak too much for no reason. وَلَا يَعْبَثْ بِيَدِهِ وَلَا غَيْرِهَا. And you shouldn't play around with your hands in front of your teacher, right? For no reason. وَلَا يَلْتَفِتَ يَمِينًا وَلَا شِمَالٍ مِنْ غَيْرِ حَاجَةٍ. You shouldn't look towards the right and the left for no reason, but you should focus on your teacher. The Sahaba, when the Prophet ﷺ, he used to speak, in the narrations it says, كَأَنَّ عَلَى رُؤُوسِهِمُ الطَّيْرِ. It was as if, right, on their heads were birds. And if they moved left or right, the bird would fly away. So they would be so still. And they would listen to the Prophet ﷺ. And so that's the etiquette of the student as it relates to their teacher as well. Then he says, وَمِمَّا يَتَأَكَّدُ الْإِعْتِنَاءُ بِهِ. And what is also very important to take notice of and to take heed of, أَلَّا يَقْرَأَ عَلَى الشَّيْخِ فِي حَالِ شُغْلِ قَلْبِ الشَّيْخِ. You shouldn't recite upon your teacher when you know that there's something preoccupying them, right? Whether it is, he says, وَغَمِّهِ وَفَرَحِهِ. Let's say the teacher is sad about something, or they're very excited and happy about something. That's not a good time to read to them. Why? Because their heart is preoccupied with something else. وَجُوعِهِ وَعَطَشِهِ. If they're very hungry or they're very thirsty, and you know that, that's not a good time to read to them as well. وَنُعَاسِهِ وَقَلَقِهِ. If they're worried or they're drowsy. وَنَحْوِ ذَلِكَ مِمَّا يَشُقُّ عَلَيْهِ أَوْ يَمْنَعُهُ مِنْ كَمَالِ حُضُورِ الْقَلْبِ وَالنَّشَاطِ وَأَنْ يَغْتَنِمَ أَوْقَاتِ نَشَاطِ الشَّيْخِ. You have to take advantage of the time in which your teacher is the most energetic and the most ready to teach you. So you don't come to the teacher when they're tired, at a bad time, when it's very late. It's not good, and it's not from the etiquette of the student to do so. وَمِنْ آدَابِهِ. This is very important. The next part, the next few sentences is very important. أَنْ يَحْتَمِلَ جَفْوَةَ الشَّيْخِ وَسُوءَ خُلُقِهِ. That the student of the Quran, they're able to bear with when their teacher at times is dry with them, or their teacher does something that upsets them. And oftentimes students are not patient with this. When this happens, as soon as it happens, what happens? They leave the majlis. The next day they don't come. The next week they don't come. Why? Because the sheikh said this to me, or he did this to me, right? You have to be patient, and you have to give him an excuse of why he did this, and he's going to mention that. وَأَلَّا يَصُدَّهُ ذَلِكَ عَنْ مُلَازَمَتِهِ وَاعْتِقَادِ كَمَالِهِ. This shouldn't stop you from staying with the sheikh and continuing to benefit from him, and also to believe that he is competent and he is one who has high moral character and virtue. وَيَتَأَوَّلَ لِأَفْعَالِهِ وَأَقْوَالِهِ الَّتِي ظَاهِرُهَا الْفَسَادُ تَأْوِيلَاتٍ صَحِيحَةٍ. When you see actions that are apparent to you that may seem like it's incorrect coming from the teacher, you have to do ta'wil. You have to interpret it as maybe there's the reason why the sheikh did this, or maybe something caused him or pushed him to say this or do this that I don't know of. So you have to give him an excuse every time. فَمَا يَعْجِزُ عَنْ ذَلِكَ إِلَّا قَلِيلُ التَّوْفِيقِ أَوْ عَدِيمِهِ. The only one who is prevented from doing this is the one who has not been given tawfiq from Allah. If you see yourself that this is an issue with you, then that means that you're being prevented from the tawfiq of Allah. Because if you're patient just for a little time, then you're going to be able to benefit a lot more. You're going to be able to benefit a lot more. And it says here, وَقَدْ قَالُوا, they say, مَنْ لَمْ يَصْبِرْ عَلَى ذُلِّ التَّعَلُّمِ بَقِيَ عُمَرَهُ فِي عِمَايَةِ الْجَهَالَةِ. The person who is not patient, right, for the, you can say, debasement that comes with learning just for an hour or a short period of time, then that person is going to remain the entirety of their life in jahala, in ignorance. So would you prefer to be patient upon the dryness and the coldness and the statements from your sheikh that may hurt you just for a short time, or would you rather be in a state of ignorance your entire life? You have to choose. That's a decision that the student has to make. Then he says, it's like, وَمِنْهُ الْأَثَرُ الْمَشْهُورُ عَنْ ابْنِ عَبَّاسِ. There's a famous statement of Ibn Abbas where he says, رضي الله عنهما, دَلَلْتُ طَالِبًا. He said, I became humiliated. Right? And what we mean by humiliated here, it means that you are not one who is of high rank, right? You're not one who is high rank when you're learning. He says, دَلَلْتُ طَالِبًا فَعَزَزْتُ مَطْلُوبًا. And Allah, He gave me honor as one who was sought. When I was seeking the knowledge, right, you feel some type of debasement because of some of these incidents that might happen. But if you're patient, he says, عَزَزْتُ مَطْلُوبًا. I became honored when I was being sought for my knowledge. So they say whoever is not patient with their teacher, they won't be able to accumulate this knowledge. Is the Asr time yet? Is Umar here? So then he says, قال النووي رحمه الله ومن آدابه المتأكدة أن يكون حريصا على التعلم مواظبا عليه في جميع الأوقات التي يتمكن منه فيها ولا يقنع بالقليل مع تمكنه من الكثير ولا يحمل نفسه ما لا يطيق مخافة من الملل وضياع ما حصل وهذا يختلف باختلاف الناس والأحوال. So the student of knowledge they have to have high aspirations when they're seeking the Quran, when they're learning the Quran and learning ilm. And they have to be consistent upon it. And he says that they should not be satisfied with little. وَلَا يَقْنَعْ بِالْقَلِيلِ مَعَ تَمَكُّنِهِ مِنَ الْكَثِيرِ. While being able to learn more and memorize more. Let's say Allah gave you the gift of memorizing 5 pages per day in the Quran. Allah gives this gift to some people. Or 4 pages, or 3 pages. And you know you can do it. Would you memorize only half a page a day? You know you're able to memorize 3 pages. You know you're able to do it. If you know you're able to memorize half a page every day, why settle for only 2 lines? Why only 3 lines? Why only 1 verse? So he says, وَلَا يَقْنَعْ بِالْقَلِيلِ مَعَ تَمَكُّنِهِ مِنَ الْكَثِيرِ. While you're able to do more, don't settle for less. وَلَا يُحَمِّلَ نَفْسَهُ مَا لَا يُطِيقُ. And don't take on too much that you know you're not able to fulfill and do. The scholars, they say, مَنْ طَلَبَ الْعِلْمَ جُمْلَةً فَاتَتْهُ جُمْلَةً. Whoever seeks this knowledge all together in one go. Costco package. You know, in Costco they have the big packages. If you take it all at one time, فَاتَتْكَ جُمْلَةً. The knowledge is going to leave you all at once as well. The Quran, if you sit down and memorize 10 pages in a day, and you know you're not really able to do 10 pages, you're going to forget it right away because the hifz is not going to be strong. So he says, وَلَا يُحَمِّلَ نَفْسَهُ مَا لَا يُطِيقُ مخافة من الملل والضياع ما حصل وهذا يختلف باختلاف الناس والأحوال. The people are different in this, and the situations are different. Not everyone is the same. Not everyone is the same. وإذا جاء إلى مجلس الشيخ فلم يجده انتظره ولازم بابه. ولازم بابه. 5 minutes? طيب. If you come to the gathering of the sheikh and he's sleeping, let's say for example, or you knock on his door and he doesn't open. He says, انتظره ولازم بابه. You wait for him and you stay at his door. Abdullah ibn Abbas, we just spoke about him. He used to take knowledge from Zayd ibn Thabit. And so he would go to the house of Zayd ibn Thabit, and at times Zayd ibn Thabit would be preoccupied, radiallahu anhu. And so he would stay there and he would not continue knocking. He would wait until Zayd ibn Thabit would come out. And so Zayd ibn Thabit, when he would see him, he would tell him, why were you doing this, Ya Abdullah? He would feel saddened because Abdullah ibn Abbas is from Ahl Bayt. He's from the family of the Prophet ﷺ. But he still would wait for Zayd ibn Thabit. And he said, Abdullah ibn Abbas would respond and say, this is how we were commanded to treat our scholars. And then what happened to Abdullah ibn Abbas after? We already spoke about the honor that he received. So I think it's Asr time. And this kitab is filled with fawaid. It keeps going. It doesn't stop. Then it goes on to the chapter of Al-Bab al-Khamis fi adabi hamil al-Quran. The one who is actually a memorizer of the Quran, how they should conduct themselves with. The one who has preserved the entire Quran in their heart. So he speaks about Qiyam al-Layl, and he speaks about how many times you do khatma. And he speaks about a lot of different things in this chapter. Then the chapter after that, the Shaykh rahimullah, he speaks about more intrinsic details pertaining to the ahkam of reciting the Quran. And so those are longer chapters. Again, inshallah, for those of you who would like to benefit from this work even more, it's called At-Tibyan fi Adabi Hamlat al-Quran. And as the schedule said, today was just selected readings. Selected readings. Perhaps I didn't select certain parts that would have been of more benefit. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But again, there's also an English translation of this work. The summary of it. The summary of it is translated. So you have At-Tibyan fi Adabi Hamlat al-Quran, and you have the Mukhtasar of it, written also by An-Nawawi, and he wrote it 6 days after he wrote this, so that the students of knowledge can memorize it and learn it. So inshallah, I highly recommend all of you, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, to benefit from this work. You can find certain ta'liqat for those who speak Arabic on YouTube as well. Scholars, they do ta'liqat of it, commentary. And inshallah, we'll suffice with that. I know it's Asr time. We'll end with the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he said, Inna lillahi ahlina min nas. Inna lillahi ahlina min nas. Hum ahlul Qur'ani, ahlullahi wa khasatuh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has His own specific people on this earth. Inna lillahi ahlina min nas. Who are these specific people on this earth, walking on this earth with you? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is attributing them to Himself. Inna lillahi ahlina min nas. Hum ahlul Qur'an. They're the people of the Qur'an. People of the Qur'an. Ahlullahi wa khasatuh. And so strive to learn the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and memorize it and hold on to it and be amongst those who not only learn it but teach it to others. Who teach it to others, because if you teach, let's say, a small child the Fatiha today, and they will recite that the rest of their life. They will recite it the rest of their life, and the ajr is going to multiply for you. هذا وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. If I said anything that was correct, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything that I said which was wrong is from myself and the shaitan. And نسأل الله التوفيق. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If you guys can pay attention very, very closely, inshallah. We'll be praying Asr at 5, really soon, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And then we'll be going out for food. Everyone will be taking one blue ticket, inshallah, on the way out. And the only way you'll get your food is through that, just to make sure that we have enough for everyone, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Sisters should have them, and the brothers, there will be a brother that's going to give it to you, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, as we're leaving. Barakallah feekum.